Ohio State fans are just saying. Welcome in the voice of college football. This is our transfer portal update for a Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you joined us yesterday, you know that we committed to a transfer portal update live with all of you each and every day, Monday through Friday this week, and we'll see how it goes beyond that. Monday through Friday this week, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, for a transfer portal update that may last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it might be. We have left the link in the chat if you would like to call. We also have a number of excellent guests lined up for this week. We got Marty Leap of Penn State Rivals dropping by today. We have other guests scheduled for the rest of the week to talk about their teams, transfer portal, incoming guys, departing guys, and the outlook and the needs and the complete personnel look for every team across college football as we try to get to as many teams as possible. I had somebody ask me the other day, what teams do you cover? And I told him, I've got to admit that we have been extremely porous in our UTEP coverage this year. We are going to do our best to increase our UTEP coverage at least 312% this year. But do appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football, and so much happening in the transfer portal. And as you guys, most of you know, the transfer portal is closed, down, done. That means that anyone who entered the transfer portal or who would like to enter the transfer portal, that opportunity is over. However, there's a few other things going on here, of course. We've got those players who have already entered the transfer portal, who made it in under that 30-day window. I think it's 30 days after the close of the, no, it's longer than that. It was about, whatever it was, 30, 40 days after the close of the regular season, all the way through, or maybe it was championship weekend through just a few days ago. So had to be in the transfer portal. However, there are a few exceptions out there. And the most notable one is if you attend a school, play for a team whose coach has left, Alabama, Washington, Arizona, San Jose State, and maybe that chain has stopped. Somebody asked me to do a video on the chain once a head coach is fired or leaves a program, what that chain looks like. And I said, you know what? That's a good idea. That would be interesting. So in this case, Nick Saban retires at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer leaves Washington to go to Bama. Jed Fish leaves Arizona to go to Washington. Brent Brennan leaves San Jose State to go to Arizona. Ken Niumatalolo, the former Navy coach, and what an excellent run he had at Navy. And I can't even remember who he was coaching under. I just read this a couple hours ago, where he has been hiding for the past couple of years, or I guess it was just the past one season, but he was an analyst somewhere. I think at UCLA. Ooh, I don't want to say that wrong. That might not be right. Not UCLA. Can't remember where he was. But regardless, that's kind of where the chain stops, because obviously they're going to replace Ken Niumatalolo with somebody as an analyst wherever he was. And shoot, I just read this like an hour ago, and now I can't remember where he was. But that's kind of the end of the chain. We're not going to follow it past John Doe, who took over for Niumatalolo. Ken Niumatalolo, where was he? Did I say UCLA? I did say UCLA. I guess he was at UCLA. So I did recall that. And he's been hired at San Jose State. This guy's an excellent football coach. That's all there is to it. And for those of us, and sometimes I will include myself, who get entrapped into thinking that there are particular head coaches who are locked into a certain style of play. First of all, some are, because that's how they became a head coach. That's how they ascended through the ranks, is because they have a calling card. Mike Leach had a calling card, God rest his soul. So Mike Leach was not going to become a triple option coach, even if he wanted to, even if he had the bent that, okay, I'm going to learn this. Well, that would have been a futile existence and pursuit. He ascended to where he was based on his offensive acumen in the air raid attack. But there's other head coaches that, sure, because of the influence of their predecessors, the influence of their mentors, who they had been around, they had certain nuances to their offensive and defensive philosophies that led them to typically lean in a certain direction, but they could certainly change. And we've seen this throughout the years with a number of coaches. The latest will be Ken Niumatalolo, who with Navy, of course, because of the limitations there, because of what he is up against, and look at the other military academies. It's not by coincidence, or it's not written in the rules of military academy football that you have to run a triple option. They do it for a particular reason. They got undersized, smart football players, and they have difficulty recruiting quarterbacks and wide receivers. And it's a little bit more detailed and extensive than that, but those are the base tenets. Therefore, that's what you do with those military academies to compete. But Ken Niumatalolo doesn't have to do that. That's not all he knows. He is going to run a wide open, space him out, throw a downfield attack with the Spartans at San Jose State. So anyway, we're on to the transfer portal here at the Voice of College Football, and we will get right to it. Please use the Amazon link in the description section. I got to be honest, for those of you who don't use the Amazon link, I just don't really understand it. If you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, because if you're shopping on Amazon, then it's the same shopping experience. This has been tried and true and tested by a number of people that say, Mark, it's the same deal. Exactly the same deal that I do when I use the link that I was using. So use the link in the description section, and doesn't cost you a penny, and adds a few pennies to the Voice of College Football, and will keep us around for a little bit longer than it might otherwise. We got SEC and Big 12 channels. Please check them out. Those links are in the description section as well. All right, let's get to the day in the transfer portal, and we will run through everything that has transpired since we last left you on Sunday afternoon. And what that starts with where is it? Is that it? That's not it. We'll get it. All right. This just came down about an hour ago. So here's another typical sign of the fallout. You got a Washington signee. So he committed to play for Kalen DeBoer, but Kalen DeBoer is gone. So early enrollee DeMarcus Davis has decided to enter the transfer portal. So there you go. 1 hour ago, DeMarcus Davis. I know little about him, if anything. I've heard the name, and maybe if I look up a few things, I will become a little bit more acquainted with him, and this will shake up my memory. DeMarcus Davis is a quarterback out of Rancho Cucamonga, California. And he is, of course, in this class of 2024. He committed last June. 17th rated quarterback in the country. So we're talking about a really good player. 17th rated quarterback in the country. And he's the 22nd rated player in the state of Alabama, or state of California. And so he's decided to move on. Unless Jed Fish can get a hold of him and keep him. So DeMarcus Davis gone as a top 20 quarterback in the 2024 class. and the Washington quarterback situation, as we discussed the other day with Lars Hansen of Locked On Huskies podcast, is an interesting one. I need to double check and make sure that our guest has the link because I might have screwed that up. Let me make sure. Elsewhere in the transfer portal recently, and I don't have a lean on where he could wind up. I don't think he's going to be one of those that follows Kalen DeBoer to Alabama because there's just way too much going on at Alabama with quarterbacks, with Jalen Milroe and with Austin Mack headed down there. Although you're looking at a true freshman here, much like Austin Mack, maybe he's comfortable with sitting for a year or two and waiting out the process. So we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, a ton of these guys are following their head coaches. So for as much as we want to talk about NIL, that's a huge factor in all this. Absolutely. For as much as we want to talk about that, look at how many players are following their coaches. And not like they're not getting paid too, but they are following their coaches when they've got a lot of options. Brent Brennan's done a nice job of being able to stabilize the situation in Arizona and keep a couple of his top, his best offensive player and his best defensive player and some other guys. But the best Arizona players other than those two have followed Jed Fish. And Kalen DeBoer, of course, has had a number of guys leave to go to Alabama with him. Now, here we've got TJ Finley, who was the starting quarterback at Texas State last year. TJ Finley, put him up as the poster child of the transfer portal. TJ Finley started at LSU. Never really became the starter, but he played. Then he was at Auburn, and again, he was never really the starter for a considerable amount of time, but he battled back and forth with, who was it, Robbie Ashford, and I'm trying to think who it would have been before Robbie Ashford. Anyway, Bo Nix, of course, was the starting quarterback, while TJ Finley, I think, was there at first. And then you had Zach Calzada, who transferred in, never really got anything done. But TJ Finley finally found a home. Well, that's a bad way to put it, Mark. Did not find a home. He found a one-year stop at Texas State, and he threw for almost 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, and was one of the top quarterbacks in the group of five. Now, after LSU, Auburn, Texas State, now he goes to Western Kentucky, which, of course, has a fine passing history. And TJ Finley was number 18 in the country in total passing yards. But there's a poster child for the transfer portal. 4 schools in probably what is now a 6 or 7 year career. All right. We've got a defection from San Jose State, possibly, unless Ken Niumatalolo can have a conversation with Quali Conley to see if he wants to stick around and play in his offense. Quali Conley had a nice year for the Spartans, who finished 7-6, ran for 842 yards, 9 touchdowns. Second in the Mountain West in yards per carry, 6.4. He's in the transfer portal. This is key. So we talked about Brent Brennan doing a nice job keeping his best offensive and best defensive players. And shoot, you could argue Jonah Coleman, the running back who left Arizona, who went to Washington, might be one of those guys, but he retained his quarterback. But 2 other Arizona players, tight ends, Keon Burnett and Dorian Thomas, they entered the transfer portal when their coach was leaving, but they since have had a conversation with Brent Brennan. So big wins from Brent Brennan already at Arizona. Keeping his quarterback, his best defensive player, and now 2 tight ends who look to be future fairly significant players. Now, Keon Burnett only caught 3 passes last year, but he was just either a redshirt freshman or a sophomore. I believe he was a sophomore. He did play 8 games the year before, so he's caught 6 passes. And then you've got just a baby there in Dorian Thomas, and I don't believe he played at all, but he was just a true freshman this past season. But they're staying with Brent Brennan. Here's a big pickup right here. Our buddy Chris Fetters, who works at 247 Sports, he's been on the Voice of College Football here a number of times, reporting Indiana transfer defensive back Jordan Shaw was going to go to Arizona, but I understand they had a coaching change. Now he's decided that he is going to Washington. Big pickup for the Huskies there. Jordan Shaw just started to play a little bit there. He could redshirt if he needed to. He only played 4 games, 12 tackles. So Jordan Shaw played a little bit at Indiana, and he goes to Washington. There we go. More Washington. Now, this is a quarterback who's got a huge upside. Damon Williams. And if we look at Damon Williams' metrics on 247 Sports, we see that Damon Williams is a top 20 quarterback, 4th rated player in the state of Arizona. And he was going to go to Arizona. Now he's going to Washington. So will Damon Williams be a big piece of that situation there in Washington, trying to grab a starting quarterback position? Is Will Rogers going to come back? We talked to Lars Hansen the other day about Will Rogers' situation, which is mighty interesting, that he leaves Mississippi State. He goes to Washington. The coach leaves. He jumps in the transfer portal, but he did participate in some off-season team meetings to show, hey, I'm still on this team and I'm thinking about sticking around. And I think it would be, without really exploring what's out there, probably in Will Rogers' best interest to stay in Washington. So Damon Williams, promising quarterback, commits to Washington. Breaking news here with Manny Nunnery, who entered the NCAA transfer portal earlier this month. Guess what? He's going to stay. He's going to play football at Florida again this season. He's a senior. So, hey, let's all throw a party in honor of Manny Nunnery, because Manny Nunnery is going to stay at Florida for his senior season. I don't know how much that really means, but at least it's a player who he's going to be one of the last probably in the history of college football to play for the same team for 4 or 5 years. Let's see if he produced much of anything this year. I don't believe so. Well, he had a decent year. He played those 12 games. Of course, the Gators did not go to the postseason. Ronald Manny Nunnery, 12 games played, 28 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a half a sack. He broke up a pass. Okay. Tom Loy reporting former Notre Dame offensive lineman Michael Carmody is headed west. So the deal with Carmody is he goes from Notre Dame to UCLA. He was the 12th rated offensive tackle in the country. And that was in 2020, coming out of high school, number 20 at offensive tackle. Now he is the 19th rated offensive tackle in the transfer portal. He was the 2nd rated player in the state of Pennsylvania. So Notre Dame offensive lineman Michael Carmody going to UCLA to play in the Big Ten. Woo-hoo-hoo! We've got Jackson Johnson. Look at this. Member for 5 months. 215 days until the start of week 0. let's take this in from Jackson. If you want somebody who's going to put a little perspective on the long off season, put a little perspective on recent college football history, and sometimes long-term college football history, it's our guy Jackson letting us know here. 215 long days until the start of week 0 on August 24, 2024. 220 days until the start of week 1. That's, of course, on a Thursday night, which also means that it will be 220 days until we have our marathon kickoff here at the Voice of College Football, our 24-hour marathon to start the college football season of 2024. Some of these comments in the chat are reminding me that I need to get that transfer portal and NIL fix video out there. We'll do that at some point soon. I should probably work on that tonight. Heck yeah. All right. So Notre Dame loses an offensive lineman and UCLA picks up Carmody, former Carlsbad, California quarterback. And so this is the big news of the week, of course, or at least, man, it seems like it's been about 4 years ago that Caleb Downs went to Ohio State. That would be the last enormous. And then, of course, Caden Proctor going from Alabama to Iowa. But this is the latest coming in on Sunday. JULIAN SAYIN has committed to Ohio State. And according to his high school head coach in Carlsbad at Lancer High, now this is always easy to say after the fact. Maybe the man is speaking the truth. I'm going to take his word for it. They, meaning Ohio State, were a close runner-up the first time around, and JULIAN cannot wait to play for Ryan Day. How about that? So, my goodness. Will Howard is going to be the starting quarterback, you would think, on day 1 for Ohio State against Akron, and then we'll see how he progresses. But Air Noland, Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholtz, JULIAN SAYIN, I got to think one of those guys is going to take off, and that's going to be that for their careers. They're going to move on because there's just too many quarterbacks in that quarterback room, guys of talent. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got our buddy Marty Leap on the line, joining us, of course, from Penn State rivals to break down the Nittany Lions. Marty, how's it going?
Pretty good, Mark. How are you?
I am good. Hit us the other day, Marty, that we might as well just tackle this thing and update it every day. So we're going to try it this week and just we're showing up every day to see the latest. And with 3 or 4 head coaches moving around, just extends everything. So how's Penn State looking? What's been going on there recently?
Yeah, the transfer portal for the winter window definitely was good to them. I mean, first and foremost, they didn't lose a lot of guys. And that's a conversation you and I have had in the past. And one of the things James Franklin does a tremendous job of is roster retention. And, it is kind of corny or whatever it is, it may sound to some people, that family atmosphere that he builds within the program, that environment. I think that's a big reason why, because there's kids who've had opportunities to leave to go to a school maybe closer to home or where they might get more money in NIL and they don't. I think that's a big part of it. So they didn't lose anybody of note, and their additions were they hit key positions. You had Julian Fleming, I think is probably the most well-known name of the group after his 4 years at Ohio State, spending the last 2 as a starter. It was a 5-star recruit from Southern Columbia High School, which is not far from Penn State in Pennsylvania back when he was in high school. So definitely a very familiar name for Penn State fans. I think he's going to add a lot to the wide receiver room, not just with on-field production, but that was a room that last year, by all accounts, really lacked a true leader, lacked the guy who was going to hold people accountable. And coming from the most competitive, most talented wide receiver room in the country, I think Fleming's going to bring a lot of that with him. And I know there's a lot of people within the Ohio State program who fully believe Julian Fleming will be a coach one day. So I think that leadership aspect he'll add to the wide receiver room will be just as impactful as what he'll add on the field. Maybe most importantly is Keandre Lambert-Smith, who, a pretty familiar name after being wide receiver 1 last year for Penn State. With Fleming in the fold, you can put Keandre Lambert-Smith into the slot, which is what Penn State wanted to do last year. But when things never really clicked with Dante Cephas, KLS was forced to stay outside. Fleming can be your outside guy. Put Lambert-Smith in the slot where he's better built for. So that was a big addition. A.J. Harris as well, cornerback. Some places had him as a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Everybody had him as a top 75, top 50 guy. Rivals, we had him number 41 in the country. He played in 8 games as a true freshman in Georgia this past year and is just transferring because he wanted to find a cornerback room basically that's not as loaded as Georgia's. And Penn State loses a lot at cornerback. So that was a big need that they nailed. I mean, I think there's probably an argument to be made that Harris might have been the most talented cornerback in the portal. And the another big name that they brought in, Nolan Rucci, another former 5-star recruit from Pennsylvania. His dad is a former letter winner at Penn State, played a lot of years with New England, was on the Patriots all-decade team in the 90s as an offensive lineman. Out of high school, I think everybody expected him to wind up at Penn State. He went to Wisconsin, a big part of that being that his brother Hayden was a tight end at Wisconsin. And as an offensive lineman, you can't really fault anyone for picking Wisconsin for developmental purposes either. But he's back home now. He was a kid who I think a lot of people in Wisconsin expected him to step in as a starter at left tackle this year. But when Nelson decided to come back to college for one more year, I think that probably played a role in Rucci transferring. Penn State has 2 open jobs to tackle, so have a chance to compete for a starting job there. But, I mean, they've added some other depth pieces. Jalen Kimber, who'll be a depth guy at corner. Chase Meyer, a kicker who at Tulsa last year only missed 1 PAT and only 2 field goals. So, they've done a good job of tackling their needs thus far, while also retaining their roster pretty well. So definitely a successful first portal session here for Penn State.
Okay, Marty, I'm going to put you on the spot about the family atmosphere. How is that manifested?
I mean, again, this sounds corny. It sounds cheesy. It sounds dumb. But James Franklin, whenever he talks to his team, everything he says, every speech, he always starts and ends it with everything starts with "I love you," everything ends with "I love you." And I think that just kind of encapsulates that. If you read coming out of visit weekends, they prioritize the whole family. They're going to be a coaching staff who they're not just recruiting you; they're going to recruit mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, siblings, whoever it is. And I think the thing is they do a great job of getting to know the whole family, making the whole family truly feel like they're part of the program, not just the player. That goes a very long way towards building that family atmosphere and that within the program that they have. And again, like I said, I think that's a huge reason why they're able to do what they do with roster retention, especially in the era of the transfer portal and NIL and that sort of thing.
And I got to think that for individuals who are used to strong families, maybe they take it for granted, don't understand it, but then the parents and everyone around them understands that you're going to miss this. So you want to go somewhere where you're going to continue to feel this kind of support. And then for, unfortunately, those individuals that never had that might, in a sense, be a little uncomfortable or whatever, be different for them, but they may just run to it, embrace it, and be like, yeah, I've never had a family kind of atmosphere. So, I was commenting right before you came on that we can run to the pessimistic NIL corner of this is always the driving force of every move that any player makes. But let's also notice that when these coaches are leaving, they're bringing a lot of players with them. Those players signed with that coach, and then they're leaving to go play for that coach because that's what they signed up for, and they attached themselves and they saw something in that coach that they wanted to be part of, so they left.
Yeah. And, I think you're seeing a fine example of that right now with Alabama. A lot of the guys that are coming with Kalen DeBoer are guys who are only in their second or third year at Washington. So guys that DeBoer recruited, not necessarily guys DeBoer inherited. And, to circle back to the family aspect, I think too, and I'm sure as a parent, Mark, you can relate to this. If you're going and seeing these schools with your sons and they're trying to decide what school they're going to play football at, and as a parent, you see that atmosphere, you see that environment. And again, like you said, as a parent, you're going to get that, like, hey, this is important. You're going to want this. And that's going to help win over a lot of moms and dads and that sort of thing in recruiting. I mean, oftentimes in recruitment, Mom's the most important person. Mom, grandma, dad, whoever it may be. Those are the people you need to win over more than the actual players. And I think that goes a long way. Because, I mean, you mentioned wanting to play for these certain coaches and how NIL isn't the be-all, end-all. I think Julian Fleming is a good example of that. You know, obviously he had a great relationship with Penn State's coaches in high school, being a local kid, being a 5-star recruit. Even after he committed to Ohio State, he would continue to come to team camps on campus when he did. There would always be the pictures of Franklin talking with him, and clearly they kept that relationship strong. And Fleming even said it when he entered the portal. He entered the portal with the idea of going to Penn State and nowhere else. He wanted to come back home for his last year, in his words. He still had that great relationship with James Franklin and the staff. And I know there were other schools who offered him more money in NIL deals, but Penn State's where he wanted to be. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think a lot of people see NIL as, like you said, this big scary monster of, well, it's just going to be like the pros where everybody's going to take whoever offers them the most money. And that's not the case. And that's where building those relationships, the environments, you know, the cultures that places like Penn State have become so important and can be so beneficial to you. I mean, look at Texas A&M as the complete opposite, right? They signed the greatest recruiting class ever, and it's just because they threw money around, and it's been a complete disaster for them because they didn't have any of the other things that go into it.
I hope that things work out for Julian Fleming. He was arguably the best wide receiver coming out of high school, and he gets to Ohio State, and I would not in any way term him as a bust. He had a really nice season 2 years ago, caught 6 touchdowns, like 33 balls. But when you're in that, number one, he comes into a situation where there's obviously he's tripping over 5 stars in the same wide receiver room. Then number two, he gets nicked up. He just has nagging injuries that kind of don't make him quite right. Well, maybe if he was somewhere else, they would have forced him out there. He would have forced himself and been the best option still at 80% or 70%. But there, he's not. And then he gets behind the 8 ball there. Again, 2 years ago, he put it together to a certain extent and wasn't the first option or the second option, but turned out to be a good complementary piece where he still may have that potential to be, between he and KLS, who caught 52 balls last year, a really good tandem there at Penn State.
Yeah, and you mentioned that wide receiver room at Ohio State. He was there same time as Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, who've all been first-round picks. Marvin Harrison, who's going to be a first-round pick, and Emeka Ibuke, who's going to be a first-round pick. So, that's a tough thing to crack through. And I think the fact that he was still able to see the playing time he did as wide receiver 3 just speaks volumes again to that work ethic of his commitment to his craft. And I think one other thing, I know I mentioned the locker room aspect of it. This past year, Penn State's offense obviously did not have the same explosive running ability that it did a lot in 2022. And they really missed the downfield blocking of Brenton Strange. And Fleming was arguably the best downfield blocking wide receiver in college football last year. So I think adding him to the mix and adding that downfield blocking aspect that they really missed when Brenton Strange went to the draft and wanted to be a second-round pick of the Jaguars, I think getting that can really help bring back some of those explosive runs from Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen again in the fall, because I think that was a very underrated aspect of that people overlooked. Was a lot of those runs, it was like this year, they get through that first line, you get 4 or 5 yards, and then that's when Strange would throw that knockout block that would spring you for the next 15, 20, 25 yards. And there was no one there to throw that block this year. So I think getting that aspect from Fleming could be huge for the offense as well.
And Fleming's career, actually, the first year also overlapped Jamison Williams by 1 year. He was there. And at the back end, now Carnell Tate, who they're saying, if he fulfills his potential, another Marvin Harrison Jr., that's a long ways off. Who knows? And then, of course, Jeremiah Smith and everybody they're getting this year. So just an overabundance there. In terms of the NFL draft decisions at Penn State, did those pretty much turn out the way you anticipated?
Actually, again, I think that went better for Penn State than anticipated. I think a lot of people expected Keandre Lambert-Smith to go, and he did not. Devon Ellies and Hakeem Beamon, 2 of their top 3 defensive tackles, were fully anticipated to go pro and are coming back for a 6th year. And same with right guard Salim Wormley, who's a 3-year starter on the offensive line. Everyone anticipated him to go pro, and he'll be back for a 6th year. So outside of those 5 guys, I should say, 4 or 5, however many it is, things went according to plan. But whenever the things that don't go according to plan are guys returning you expected to lose, that's a big positive. I mean, obviously, Fashanu was always going to go. Kalen King was always going to go. Johnny Dixon was always going to go. These guys that rate out as potential first-round picks, Chop Robinson as well. But so those were 4 guys that they did not expect back. And getting them back is huge, but especially the defensive tackles, because defensive tackle was going to be a position they were going to need to address in the transfer portal, or else risk having to throw some true freshmen to the fire in the fall. But now that you get Beeman and Ellie's back, you return your top 4 defensive tackles from last year. Same group that's been the top 4 defensive tackles dating back to 2022. So that all of a sudden is a very deep, very talented, very experienced room for Penn State, and should be a real strength for Tom Allen's defense next year.
Marty, we've talked about it a zillion times about the 12-team playoff arriving at the right time for Penn State. And you could say that for a lot of programs. However, we have truly meant that for Penn State. If you go year to year, as you well know, and I've talked about this many times with you here and not here, that it just has proven that this would be the program that would benefit the most. After another, I want to call it a typical Penn State season, in good ways and in not so good ways. I think that's pretty obvious to the average college football fan, exactly what I mean there too. I don't know what's going on inside of Penn State circles about how people feel about the program, but nationally, it seems like something needs to break free, break loose, break through, because there's this, well, they're really good, but it's not happening.
Yeah, and I've talked about this with a lot of people, friends of mine on Twitter, on our message board at Happy Valley Insider. Like, I think a lot of people, it's twofold. One, how much different is this program viewed, as James Franklin viewed, if they're not in the same division? I'm not even going to say Ohio State and Michigan, it's even just Ohio State. Because up until the last 3 years, James Franklin had a winning record against Michigan since 2016. So you throw out the first 2 years where they're still dealing with sanctions and roster limits and all that. 2016 through 2020, James Franklin had a winning record against Michigan. So it was always the Buckeyes that held them back. And they've won more games. There's been no program that's won more games at Penn State during the playoff era and not made the playoff. Like, we've gone at it a million times, like you said. And the other aspect of that for me is people are frustrated because they can't get over that hump. But at the same time, those frustrations, and I've been frustrated about it at times too, those frustrations stem from the fact James Franklin has taken this program up a level, to a level it hasn't been in a long time. Everybody in Penn State circles will talk about the 1999 Minnesota game where they blew it at the end. Minnesota hit the field goal. Penn State went from being ranked number 1 in the country, probably the best team in the country, to losing their last 3 games. From that game until James Franklin arrived through the 2000s and the 2010s, you had a couple outlier years, but this team was averaging like 8-9 wins a year. You had multiple losing seasons in there, had a couple years they didn't win any games in the Big Ten. And now Franklin has gotten them back to where these last 8 years since 2016 is the best 8-year run they've had since at least the early to mid 90s. Maybe probably really have to go back to the 80s when they won 2 titles in 8 years. So the last time they had this kind of success in an 8-year stretch. So I think that's something too people need to remind themselves of is, yes, it's frustrating, but a lot of that frustration stems from the fact James Franklin has done a tremendous job, has taken this program to a level it hasn't been at in a very long time. And, I would much rather, as a program, be frustrated with, man, we're winning 10 games a year and this isn't good enough. Like Jaywan Side, the running backs coach, put it perfectly. He had a press conference at the end of the year when he was serving as co-offense coordinator, and someone asked him about, hey, you've been here for a long time as a position coach. Have you ever thought about going elsewhere to be a coordinator or anything? And I forget what the full quote was, but part of it was, I love working at a place where we get pissed off about going 10-2. And I thought that was very telling, where it's like most programs would kill to have the success they have had the last decade. But to them, it's not good enough, and it's what drives them. And like you said, that 12-team playoff, I think, is going to benefit them more than any other program in the country. Because even you look ahead to next year, you don't play Michigan. Outside of Ohio State, your toughest game is probably a trip to Wisconsin. So going 11-1 is very doable. At worst, you should be 10-2 again. And I have a hard time seeing a Big Ten team especially one with the cloud of Penn State winning double-digit games and being left out of a 12-team playoff. I mean, I know we don't know 100% yet what the makeup's going to look like because the 5 and 7 idea is probably out the window with the collapse of the Pac-12. But I have a hard time seeing a scenario where, any team out of the Big Ten or the SEC with the schedule they have to play can win double-digit games and get left out most years. And like I said, they have a very favorable schedule next year. You get Ohio State at home also. So that makes them, as Ohio State's probably going to go to the year, maybe ranking number one in the country with what they've done. But still, you'd much rather play them at home than in Columbus. So I think they are set to really improve, not necessarily improve as a program, but the national reputation, like you said, improve as a program. Because again, I think this is a program, and James Franklin is a coach who is looked at much differently if they wouldn't have had to spend the last 8 years in the same division as Ohio State. Because let's say even Penn State or Ohio State would have been in the Big Ten West, I think there would have been multiple years they would have played each other in Indy. Both could have come in undefeated, and both probably already had a playoff spot locked up. So I do think that they're really that national perception of the program will benefit from the 12-team playoff.
Because you alluded to it, I could have packed a better punch with that question if I would have also included Michigan just won a national championship and Ohio State spending like drunken sailors and acquiring like free agents all over the place. Whether that adds to the angst and the apprehension about breaking through.
Well, I think part of with the breaking through thing, Penn State doesn't play Michigan again until I think like 26 or 27. So you don't have to deal with them for a couple of years. And if you do, you're playing them at Indy. And again, you get to the Big Ten title game at 11-1 or better, you're probably already in the playoff anyhow. And I also think part of it with Michigan, I personally still think Harbaugh is going to go to the NFL, rather it's Atlanta, rather it's the Chargers. I think he's going to go. And Michigan's Michigan. I think it's similar to Penn State in a lot of ways, but they're always going to be really good. But Harbaugh has leveled that program up. Rather it's Sharon Moore, or if they go make an external hire, can you expect them to continue to stay at that level? I don't know if you can. I think a lot of that is a result of Harbaugh and what he's done. And even this past year, I think was kind of a culmination, just the perfect storm of they brought a lot of guys back who were seniors who wanted to come back and make one more run at this thing. They were loaded on defense. So I do think that, again, I don't think Michigan's going to fall off by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that if Harbaugh goes, they will take a little bit of a step back and maybe more of what we saw from Michigan in the later Lloyd Carr years where, hey, you're consistently winning those 9 or 10 games, but you're not, number one in the country going undefeated winning the Big Ten 3 years in a row.
Good stuff. Marty Lee, Penn State Rivals. Marty, always appreciate you stopping by, sir.
Absolutely, Mark. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Great stuff out of Marty Leap. And of course, we do a Big Ten live show here now on Friday. So the Big Ten live show, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And the Ocho's coming up tonight with John D'Adamo. That's it. The Ocho. When is that? I'll have to look that up. The Ocho. Yeah, Monday at, my Spanish isn't very good. 8 o'clock Eastern time, folks, with John D'Adamo, of course. All right. And before we take this call, our intent here, and we don't know how long we're going to do that. That is up to all of you. But we're going to do a transfer portal update each day throughout this week, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Guys like Marty Leap are going to stop by to give us updates on their team. I got a list of guests coming up this week. Marty might be the only one today, but just tons of people flying by that are going to provide that. We will take your calls if so be it. It's got to be about the transfer portal because this is our little update on the transfer portal each day. We'll see if this catches on. I would love to be here every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time to update the transfer portal. As we saw today, there were like 5 or 6 guys to go through. And so we will do that. I did notice before we take this next call, and I will probably not be able to find the reference. Yes, I did. Look at Moose here. Moose doing a fine job, as does Jackson, as does John, and others to promote the channel. And this is not a company we necessarily promote on a regular basis, not because they don't do an amazing job, because we did actively promote them, but we are still partnered with Hero Soap Company to the point where last month I received a check for, you ready for this? $1.44 from the Hero Soap Company. but we don't talk about them, and maybe we should. We should. So the Hero Soap Company. So I've tried out the product. They have shipped me their product, and we go back with them 4 or 5 years, something like that. And so it's a really good product, and it's called Hero Soap Company because they take a portion of what they earn and they donate it to veterans in very special ways, to help disabled veterans, injured veterans, veterans who need a helping hand. So it's a great product, all natural, and you get 10% off by using the promo code. How about that? Mark, M-A-R-K. That's the promo code. And there you see, and you can just grab that URL and just type it in there, and you can go directly to the Hero Soap Company and check it out. You can read all about it right there, but it's a good product, and use the promo code MARK and get 10% off. Also, you can just grab the link. It's down in the description section of the videos, but it might be buried a little ways, but it's down there. Our friends at the Hero Soap Company. All right, let's take your calls. We got Jackson showing up tonight. No, we don't. I thought we had Jackson. No, we've got Adam showing up. There we go. Adam, what's going on today? Sorry about that.
No problem. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'll be brief. I just wanted to make 2 points, both about the portal and NIL. And maybe I'm just old school, but the portal, what are we teaching these kids? We're not teaching them loyalty. We're not teaching them how to overcome adversity. We're not teaching them how to stick with a team. We're creating a bunch of selfish, entitled, narcissistic players. And I can tell you, I teach undergraduate students, and what I see is the same thing. It's all about me. It's all about entitlement. And I think the values we're teaching them won't serve them well in life. And I think that gets compounded immeasurably when you put the NIL in. I mean, you have coaches buying players. Look at Isaiah Bond flashing his Lamborghini and his $750,000. They are literally buying players. And for what? Some of these players are getting bought when they haven't stepped on a football field. And so you're not only teaching them terrible values, but you're incentivizing kids to care only about themselves and about money. And you're creating these collectives that are essentially pay for play. I mean, wasn't NIL supposed to mean that you benefit off your name, image, and likeness, such as by, I don't know, autographs and selling stuff? I mean, was it really meant to be what it is now? No. So the combination of the portal and NIL is creating a culture of entitlement. And it's creating a selfish, all about me culture. And I think that's going to destroy, the kind of values that make people successful, not only in football, but in life, which is, yeah, your coach might leave. Yeah, you might face adversity, but you have to learn how to get through that. Now, there are certainly some reasons I can understand for transferring, like JULIAN, for example, where he's probably not going to see the field for a few years. But a large part of this reflects a culture of it's all about me that's being incentivized by the portal rules and by NIL. And it gets exacerbated when you have a situation like Alabama, where essentially other schools can raid the portal, pay them off without any competition whatsoever, because only the Alabama players are available in the portal. So the totality of these circumstances to me means, we need to do better about teaching our kids old school values, because in the end, it's not going to serve them well in life. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a great statement. I truly mean that, Adam. So I want to clarify. I just want to make sure I caught something. You are a teacher.
Yeah, I teach undergraduates.
God bless you. So
thank you.
Yes, that is a great profession and an important profession for sure. All right, so here's my thought that everything you say, I can completely back. I'm in complete agreement with. But the issue is, how do we enforce these things and instill these things, and how do we build a structure that is going to enhance and support what we're trying to convey, what we're trying to teach? And so the only way to do that, I believe, is to, first of all, we can at least enforce the rules, as you alluded to, that at least, even though it's still perpetuating an atmosphere of look at me, I'm paid for Instagram photos or for signing autographs, which at least there's some exchange of something. There has to be an exchange of, yes, some value for value. And in this culture, again, we have completely distorted what value is or should be when it comes to celebrity and entertainment and all those things. But at least there's an exchange of value for value. I get paid because I am doing this, I am providing this, as opposed to it's pay for play. I'm not seeing the NIL aspect out of these athletes. I've seen a few occurrences, seen a few examples, but by and large, I'm not. And maybe I'm not on the right channels, on the right social media to find it or see it or have people throw it in my face, but I'm not seeing that as well. But we do live in a society, and I do agree with this, that there is freedom of choice. So number one, I don't know what student movement looks like in terms of students transferring. I don't know what the general population looks like. I didn't transfer. My daughter didn't transfer. I've got a brother and sister who didn't go to one school. So I don't know what those numbers look like. If this is any different from that standpoint than just, so shouldn't we be teaching all students that? Or should we be?
Well, I think we should. And, it makes me think of these players getting all this NIL money, right? Well, if the players are going to get it, why don't students with a 4.0 GPA and a 1600 GPA get NIL money from the colleges that they go to, because they're increasing their prestige and their rankings in U.S. News and World Report? I mean, if we're going to pay the players, why don't we start paying the students? I mean, ultimately, I think that the road we're going down is one where we're creating a culture that I see in my own students. They're always thinking about what's the next best thing I can get for me immediately, and they're not learning the values of hard work, perseverance, and overcoming adversity. And I think that that's a serious problem. So maybe a solution is this. Now, I'm not sure exactly how to solve it, but what if we treated college football players as employees and they have an employment contract that they have to abide by, or we have salary caps to at least try to maintain some competitive balance? I mean, I'm not sure, but what do you think of those suggestions?
So I agree with them, but college football is going to have to be completely restructured. So getting back to your first point about the high level academic student, first of all, they are being compensated through scholarship and grants and aids and so forth. So there is a level of compensation there based on what the school is deemed their worth coming into the school. Or I don't know how it works once you arrive at the school. Maybe you didn't originally get a scholarship, but you're so outstanding once you've arrived. I'm guessing that there have been instances where an individual can gain a scholarship while they're in school. So
True.
There is that acknowledgement and compensation. But let's face it, the way things are valued in our society, there's only, and I'm not saying that the school has a perfect, and the universities across the entire landscape have a perfect formula to determine this is what these academic elites are providing us, and this is the compensation, and it's goes right in line with what we are achieving on the football field and what we are compensating. But I am guessing the football aspect of it is so overwhelmingly greater than the academic aspect that I got to guess it's somewhat in line with what the value that is being brought by those athletes versus the students.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just, when I teach my students, I kind of worry about the future of our young people and what we're teaching them. And sometimes I also worry, like, where are their parents in all this? I mean, I grew up in the 80s, I guess I'm old school, but teaching kids how to fight through adversity and persevere through, difficult circumstances and adapt to change is important. And I worry that the road we're going down isn't teaching them that. But just my thoughts. Again, great show. Thanks for having me on. Always good talking with you.
Thank you, Adam. Call back anytime. We've got a lot of thoughts to go back and forth on this topic, but it's an endless one right now because it's not going to be solved for quite some time, if ever.
Sure is. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Adam. So he makes a great point right there in regards to young people, children, and what they're given. I have always, even if I had it within my means to do something for my child, I still made them work for it, still made them struggle and have to work and show the value of whatever they were trying to attain, unless it's a birthday gift, obviously, but anything beyond that. And so I've always thought that even if I was worth $50 million, which I'm only worth 42 million right now, so I'm not worth $50 million, that I would not be handing houses to my kids, cars to my kids, anything like that. I've always met them halfway, quarter of the way. Okay, here's what I'm going to contribute to that car, your first car. My kids both bought their first cars, but they didn't buy the entire car. They didn't have to pay for the entire thing. I chipped in. Same thing with schooling. So I think that as we parent and as we try to mentor children through that, there's a balance of support and allowing them to grow up and to determine that they need to build a work ethic to survive in this world. All right. But when it comes to the whole salary cap thing, I'm going to let that discussion go, but I've stated my position a number of times and I will in the future. There is a solution there, but I don't know if college football is going to be what we want it to be if we institute that solution. DeReal's showing up today. What's going on, sir?
Nothing much. I mean, that last caller, he made some excellent and fantastic points, Mark. I'm very impressed with his knowledge of the game. But yeah. I think we just all kind of need to stop playing around. And the NCAA, they're the kings of just kicking the can down the road. But, Mark, the college football should just separate itself from all other sports and just be its own entity. And I think that would solve a vast majority of the problems.
Yeah, Ross Bjork took the Ohio State athletic director's position this week, coming in from Texas A&M, and I got to think that he is going to be on the initiation side of that, because if somebody states that in public, that's maybe where we should head, I got to think that he's not thinking that's maybe where we should head, because he wouldn't state it. He wouldn't put it out there. He's saying basically, I believe that's where we should go. Now, am I going to be able to get enough support from other ADs and other people of influence to make this happen? Or else, if you were just undecided, maybe this should happen, well, you wouldn't state that. But he was very upfront about that. It's just become so massive and it's just run so differently than the other sports, not necessarily men's basketball. And of course, women's basketball is growing fast, but it's just a giant and it's different than the others.
Right. It's also ridiculous that every decision made for every sport is made by one sport. I mean, the only reason Oregon is in the same conference as Rutgers is because of football. There's no other sport where they should be in the same conferences. And I think if you separated it, you can have the Pac-12 come back to life and just be an Olympic sport conference, for example. So I think it solves the problem of regionality. I mean, college football is already basically a semi-pro league. They could subsidize all other sports, but I don't know how that would work with Title IX and stuff like that, but it's the obvious direction it's going. And in my opinion, it's just too much money for all the legal issues not to kind of go by the wayside.
If that happened, I and a lot of people would not like it, but I would understand the practicality of it. Yes, we could still have a packed conference right now with all of those teams playing Olympic sports and probably just traveling for football for sure, of course, and making those business decisions. The basketball, I don't know where that would stand. Of course, it's a huge revenue sport. I'm not discounting it. But it's not to that extent of football to where I don't know where they would draw the line. But I would not like the feel of Oregon and Rutgers are in the same football conference, but it's a different deal for all these other sports. And I don't have a great argument against that, except for I don't like it. I don't like the feel of it. I would like, and for those people that go to those schools, attend those schools, take pride in those schools, graduate from those schools, and then become alumni and look back at their time there and root for their schools, there's something that's not going to sit well with the individual who is an Oregon sports fan and sees maybe he or she is really involved and happy to watch tennis and softball and all these other things and a reconvening of the Pac-12, but we play in the Big Ten in football. But it may just have to come to that. So
Right,
if you
and
follow me, I don't like that may have to be the solution, but that may indeed be the solution.
Right. I'm not saying I don't believe there's an ideal situation.
No.
Because I think the ideal situation happened 10, 15 years ago when we had the organization known as the NCAA. If they were forward-thinking organization, they should have came up with a solution for this current situation. But, because they're the NCAA, they couldn't come up with anything. They said NIL exists and said, okay, figure it out on your own. So that's why we're at where we're at now. But Mark, there's plenty of sports right now where you have teams and conferences that aren't in other conferences. I mean, look at Big Ten lacrosse. You've got Johns Hopkins in there, for example. So it's not like it's a foreign concept. I mean, look at this year. You're going to have all 2020. Notre Dame went to the ACC to play football. So it's happened before. So I think people would get used to it over time.
Yeah, people will get used to it. And, there's going to be a next generation that's all they know. We run into that all the time when we start talking about nostalgia, and this is the way things are. And for the people that weren't around for that, well, they are just accustomed to the way things are. But again, it's all changed and it's all just different. And again, to rip these conferences apart for the sake of one sport, even though it's the moneymaker, it would have been nice if there would have been a strong enough NCAA with enough vision and enough fortitude to say, hang on, let's figure this out and we'll get to the football and the money. It may take an extra year or two at the outside, but let's do what's best for the fans of these sports, the alumni, the students, most of all, to have a swimmer from UCLA be able to stay in state. And you could even make those sports even more condensed geographically than they are, because no longer would it have to be UCLA having to travel to Oregon and to Utah and all these other places that when you look at a national map look like they're close, but they're really not. Shoot, at those levels, as you well know, the smaller the sport, the more smaller schools are able to compete and do on a national level. So UCLA could be in a conference with Sacramento State and Cal State, Cal Poly and Cal Davis and San Diego State, and they could have a very concentrated swimming conference, softball conference, tennis conference, etc.
Exactly right, Mark. And to me, that's the most efficient way to do it and the most effective way to do it. I'm not sure if you saw, but after the four big schools, Oregon, Washington, and the others announced they were going to the Big Ten, a bunch of Oregon softball players are like, why am I going to play for Oregon now? Their family wants to travel to their games. They believe they were in the Pac-12, and now they got to go to Rutgers and stuff. Now, I understand they should be just grateful for having a scholarship and being able to play because nobody cares about softball. I understand that. But also understand the athlete's point of, hey, listen, this is a family sport. This is a niche thing. My parents are proud of me. This is probably the only time I'm going to do this in my entire life at a good level. So let them see me.
Yeah. We're probably going to pass 3 schools on the way to the airport that we could be playing in softball while we're traveling all the way to Penn State on a 3.5-hour flight, and the time change. And Yeah, absolutely. For us to go out to Penn State and for 52 people to be watching us there, it's yeah.
Right. If
What
they
you're
made
saying,
more
what you're
amount, even if
proposing
they
makes total sense.
right, exactly. If they made any sense of more money or anything like that, to where it affected the bottom line at all, there could be somewhat of an argument. But there's no argument. It's just a pit of money being wasted for no reason because of football.
Although the point that you made up a few minutes ago, which has been the case in a number of instances for years and years and years, that has always been the case in terms of schools not always being in the same conference for all sports. That's because there is an absence of those sports for those particular schools, and they have to gravitate to another conference because that sport is not played. That's what has precipitated that.
Right, but this is taking it to a whole different level because there's softball teams in the West Coast that play softball, but we're prioritizing it because of the brand value of Oregon to go play Rutgers. So it's different.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for the athletes and their families and everybody who wants to go see them.
Yeah, I do agree with you on all fronts. And just for the sake of we're keeping all of our sports in the same conference, I cannot think of any other. And there is a certain practicality. That's probably not the right word to keep all these schools together in everything to align it, and that there is also an academic component there. But again, it's far outweighed by yeah, staying at home. And if you're going to travel long distances, that means that you have achieved national success and you are playing in an NCAA tournament or a regional, and that's a whole different deal and a different level. But to arrive at that point, shoot, even if you go back to the 70s in men's basketball, those regionals were very regionalized geographically, that produced the Sweet 16 and the Final Four. UCLA would always play out west, regardless of what their record was or what the seeding just went along with. You're staying out west. You're a Western team, and they played Western teams. And that's even in men's basketball and a revenue sport, how that was approached at one time.
Right. They still somewhat apply that, but it's not nearly as regionalized as it was back then. I think they do something like
I'm wrong. They try to reward the teams that achieved by keeping them close to home.
Yeah, I believe the one seeds get a pick of where they want to play. Okay. Or they assign it based on region. So Gonzaga, if they're a one seed, they'll always play in the West Coast regional or the West bracket. Kentucky usually plays in the East or the North region because they're in between those. Kansas would play in the Midwest regional, for example. So they still prioritize that type of stuff, but it's just insane the direction of college athletics is going, and it's a very uncertain period. And I just don't want to see this whole thing. What I'm worried is going to happen is college football is going to turn into like the UFL, Mark, where it's going to be a semi-pro league that's just going to have players we don't really care about, that really don't go to class, that nobody interacts with. They play for like 10 weeks, and it's just a feeder system. That's my ultimate concern. Do you have that concern?
Oh, absolutely, I do. That's the near death of the sport, is to have a facsimile of the NFL, but not be nearly as good. Nobody wants to see a watered down NFL. Oh, this is just like the NFL. And because we're bored and there's no NFL on Sunday, we're watching guys that a lot of them will play in the NFL someday, but they're number one. We're watching a bunch of guys that aren't going to play in the NFL. And then even the guys that are going to play in the NFL aren't as good as they will be once they play in the NFL. And there's no school attachment. There's no pageantry traditions. And again, you get at the heart of it. These individuals are no longer part of campus life, going to school, being part of that. And I know a lot of that has gone away already, but yeah, they're just mercenaries.
Well, another word I would use is contractors.
Yeah. Okay.
They're just paid by the school. Hey, here's your check. You get $1 million. You're going to play these 12 teams, and then you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And how pathetic that, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. You popped out there for a second. Okay. Yeah. And how pathetic that, I'll pick on your school, that on Saturday afternoon, you throw on a Kentucky jersey to represent a school that you have no other connection to other than you play football with their jersey on. Yeah.
Right. And you're already seeing like the local ties and stuff. Like, Mark, I know you, because your school, I think, epitomizes my fear more. You'll have Ohio State players because of your school throwing around bags, which you can do, but they always call Michigan the team up north, as if acting like they've always been part of this grand rivalry. And it's just so fake to me, Mark. Just such a massive turnoff for the sport. It's and honestly, it's dishonest because these players didn't care about hating Michigan until 5 seconds ago.
Yeah.
You know it's true.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're talking about the guys that just signed. I didn't see any of that, but do we have the Quinshon Judkins of the world saying that referencing the team up north?
Right. That type of thing. And it's just like, oh my goodness. It's like, you don't care about this rivalry. You don't care about the rivalries.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on that because that could be stated at any point in time. So if I'm going to direct it back to your team. Kentucky signing players and was in 1975 from Missouri and Illinois and South Carolina. And just because they showed up on campus and were legitimate students and all of that, that doesn't mean that they have an ingrained hatred for Louisville.
You're right, but it's very different when you see a player play for another team at the college level.
True.
And then transfer and hate those rivalries. It just seems so artificial and fake.
Yeah. Yes, and you countered that well. You're absolutely right. And I go back to this example all the time. I think that most college football fans that enjoy the NFL as well take some pride when they and I love that the NFL started doing this whenever they did it 15 years ago, when they would have the players introduce themselves and give the name of the school. Well, now that's completely gone by the wayside. And here in a couple of years, it's going to be, what a joke. Well, that's just the last school they played for out of 4. Yeah, you're completely right about that. Yeah, it's sad.
Right. I'm just very concerned. I wish the NCAA would actually enforce that rule that said you can only be a one-time undergrad transfer. I mean, it's on the book.
Yes.
It feels like something isn't like legally compromising or anything. I mean, they run the sport, it's governing. I understand freedom and choice and stuff, but having one time to transfer and then one time when you're a graduate seems fair and reasonable to me. I mean, having players like JT Daniels transfer every single year, I mean, come on. And then I was also thinking about this because if you go to football games and stuff, you'll see people that wear jerseys and stuff. I mean, it's a more useless market than buying jerseys now.
Yes.
I mean, imagine being a Trevor Etienne fan. You're a big Florida fan. Now he's at Georgia, so what are you going to do?
I know. I threw that out on Twitter a few weeks ago. I said, I would imagine nobody's more likely to buy jerseys. Are you less likely to buy a player's jersey today than you were 5 years ago, or just about the same? Knowing that, yes, you're just buying laundry and somebody posted, I think it was, yes. I'm glad you brought up that specific example because I saw somebody post at Christmas time, some Gators fan who had a big frown on his face because he opened his Christmas present. It was a Trevor Etienne jersey. We as sports fans need to wise up when it comes to a lot of this stuff. I used to make this example all the time concerning Major League Baseball when I was a big baseball fan and people would complain about the salaries. And I would say, ultimately, the fan holds all the power. The only problem is there's a zillion fans and there's only so many players. So those zillion fans all have to unite. And that's an organizational impossibility practically. But all you'd have to do is, just even to send a message, let alone get any change, but just to send a message, don't show up at Major League Baseball stadiums for the first week of the season. Just have them be completely empty just to prove a point. But of course, somebody's going to buy tickets, but 37 people watching a Major League Baseball game just to prove a point that who controls the sport. And who controls this sport? You do, I do, all the people watching right now. We control the sport.
Well, the only time I've seen the fans unite in a way that I think actually made somewhat of a meaningful impact is when the Pac-12 went away. I mean, it was near universal agreement that was bad for the sport.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping the executives at Fox and ESPN and whoever understand that regionality should be more of a factor going forward. I'm hoping they heard the cries of the fans there.
Unless these schools and the NCAA wants to pay for play and just turn this into exactly what you just depicted, a minor league sport, which if it's a minor league sport, it's going to be nothing close to what we're talking about right now, because it's just going to be a generic NFL that's not nearly as good. Shoot, I forgot what my point was now. I took myself way too long to set up my point. There still has to be some level of, and I'm not going to be able to describe this now as well as I had it set up in my mind, but some structure to force these guys to go to class. So there still has to be a fulfillment of the requirement of pursuit toward, this is the only, or one of a few saving graces in this, could be that this is still a college sport. You're still attached to the university. If you don't go to class, then, and don't show us reasonable pursuit toward, grades and towards graduation, then now if everyone could get on board there, but the problem is everybody wants to cheat because they want to win. So they'll look the other way and won't penalize the student athletes for not going to class, not achieving grades, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I get that. The only thing I don't know, and honestly don't know this, is if they become employees, how does that change everything? How does that change? Do they have to be tied to the universities if they're granted employment status? Or could they be contracted out? That's something I just don't know the answer to that.
If suddenly all of this, let's say, immediately changed from 2023 to 2024, you, DeReal, as a Kentucky football fan, let's say the switch was turned and instantaneously you knew that every Kentucky player did not go to class, was not pursuing a degree, didn't live on campus, didn't have any association with the University of Kentucky, and just showed up to practice, put on a Kentucky jersey, and played Kentucky football in name only. How would you feel about your team?
I would kind of feel similar to how I watch the NFL and the UFL. I would just treat them as athletes, honestly, at that point. And the only reason I would root for them is the name of the state pride and conference pride. But there's something special about college football, knowing these players. They used to care about your state. They used to care. They used to be people that you see. They used to be people some of them you would know. And for all that to be ripped away, I think rips out one of the key special elements of college football that makes it different than most other sports.
And another part of this that helped hold it together that we've kind of danced around is that in the past, there just simply aren't enough jobs in the NFL for all of these players to reasonably pursue it, whether it's in their head and they believe that they've got a shot. The numbers just tell us that most of them have to legitimately pursue a degree, or they've wasted their time and they've screwed themselves and wronged themselves, but they should be pursuing a degree because they're not going to play on Sundays. But if they're being paid to play at this level, then while they should be smart enough to figure out, okay, I can't make big money in the NFL because I'm not going to get there. So I should take class seriously, should pursue a degree. But you know what? They're throwing me 80 grand a year. That's pretty good money. And I'm playing football and I'm going to do that. And I'll figure it out in 3 years what I'm going to do. That still tears at the fabric of what this is, because what, again, has somewhat held together the amateur status of this and level of this has been just the numbers game dictates that the majority of players have to go to school, have to legitimately pursue a degree, and it keeps it in line to an extent.
Right. And that's really taken away not only because they're making money, but the amount of money these players are making as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure if you saw Lane Kiffin's tweet, but he said Ohio State is paying $13 million for these players in total. I mean, that's life-changing money, Mark. You don't need to work another day in your life with that amount of money if you manage it properly.
Yeah, and if Ohio State and Ryan Day doesn't manage that locker room properly, they're not going to get the bang out of the buck that they're hoping for. Although I do have an issue with Lane Kiffin, and I saw where somebody brought that to my attention. I went to his Twitter feed. I found it. The guy tweets so much, it was already buried about 15 tweets that I found it. And I thought, okay, well, what are we whining about here, Lane? So if Ohio State spent 13 million and Ole Miss spent 4 million, 6 million, 8 million, what's the magic number that it's okay for your school to spend a certain amount of money? It's just like, I think it's just human nature that once you go out in the work world, it seems like, well, what I'm making is okay, but it's not quite enough. I'd like to be making more. They make too much. Okay, everybody less than me, I don't even think about them, but everybody that makes more money than me, they're making too much money. That's a lot of money. You talk to the person that makes $100,000 a year, I'm really not making that much money. Wish I was making $250,000 a year. You talk to the $250,000, well, that's just sufficient. I wish I was making more. And that almost reeks of the same type behavior from Lane Kiffin complaining about Ohio State spending $13 million on these acquisitions, because it was the same Lane Kiffin that a year ago was complaining about Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M.
Right. It's hypocritical of Lane Kiffin to do it. Now, the message may be true in itself and that it's bad for the sport.
Yes.
But he should not be the one delivering that message.
No. And my response to it last year was, okay, you're Lane Kiffin and you're Ole Miss. I understand you're not at the top of the sport. You're not Georgia, Alabama, but you are considerably higher than most of FBS competitions. So just because Texas A&M and Ohio State and whoever else is spending at the top and you're not at the top, well, you're still above 80%. So are they supposed to all be pointing at you complaining?
Well, Mark, you understand how this works. Everybody just points up. Nobody ever takes time to reflect at themselves and say, are they the problem? Goes back to that previous caller's point about narcissism.
Absolutely.
I saw David Greenshield say he wanted the link in the chat a few times. Is he in the back room?
David's in the back room.
Good.
We can bring David on right now. Why not?
Yes, I am. Well,
hey, David.
Well, hello. Yes, I found this conversation to be interesting because, by the way, can we already print the Ohio State 2024 National Championship shirts right now, Mark?
Whoa, David. Georgia's still there. Georgia is still there.
I know. I'm doing that for the Walmart Wolverine fans out there. I just want to continue to tweak them a little bit. I know they're not the biggest fans of you either, Darrell. So I thought maybe you would indulge me there for a second.
Well, David, you might find this interesting. They might hate me more than they hate you.
That's close. That's close. Although I've hated them for nearly 40 years of my life, so I've got an ongoing disdain for them that goes way back. But I will say this, Mark. I think, and I find your guys' discussion interesting. I'll just say this. I mean, Ohio State, it may have taken them a couple of years to learn what the lay of the land here is with NIL
Yeah.
and the way it has to be used. But hey, I mean, to quote the great band Genesis, this is the world we live in.
Yes.
These are the names I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
This is it. I mean, if this is the way that business has to be done, and if this is the way that things have to go, and by the way, Dace is on your show saying that the team up north had to get their NIL game to keep their 4th and 5th round draft picks staying in college so they wouldn't leave early and go to the NFL, because they're probably going to make more through NIL deals through the Stallion or whatever than by getting drafted in the 5th and 6th round or wherever they were going to get drafted. Hey, if you can get mediocre college players to play 6 or 7 years of college, eventually they'll be pretty good football players. But I think that there's an argument to be made, and to be fair to them, I think that that's the right way to do it. That's the way it was intended to be used. The problem that I had with the system, and what we talked about before, Mark, is the way that like Miami has used it, or the way Texas A&M has used it, where basically Saban, didn't he say the not so quiet part out loud to Jimbo Fisher, where he said, you bought a recruiting class. You literally bought a recruiting class. And what's Miami been doing? Miami's out there dropping bags, and they're literally trying to buy recruits. They're literally acting like SMU in the early 1980s, and literally trying to buy recruits. So that's my issue with this, that the NIL is not necessarily was supposed to be used, for name, image, and likeness, obviously, to compensate the players when they're in school, to give them some type of compensation for what they do on the field. It wasn't supposed to be used to buy recruits, which was the original problem I had with it to begin with. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's my problem with it as well. And my ire to that is not even to the players or the coaches or the administration. It's to the NCAA. They should have been the one who put the rules in place. And I'm happy the NCAA is recently taking some sort of actions punishing Florida State and Florida. I'm happy they're at least trying to do something, but I think they're a day short, dollar late type of deal.
Well, but the NCAA, how many years have we as college football fans sat around here and said that the NCAA is a fairly worthless organization? Or we've had a lot of problems for the NCAA for a long, long period of time. And I knew that the NCAA was going to drop the ball on this and leave it to, the conferences and the presidents and the commissioners of the conferences who were going to let it become a free-for-all anyway. I knew this was going to happen even before it happened. I knew that the NCAA now, this thing is only going to get worse over time, so they might not have anything but a choice but to act eventually, though, because of I had heard a story where there was a guy that entered the portal and had to give back some of his NIL money or something like that. Had you guys heard that? Where he because there are like actual contracts with this, aren't there, Mark?
Yes, there are.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's happened.
That's why I said you got to consider changing the name of the show, Mark. The voice of semi-pro football, Mark Rogers, or something.
Don't even. You're turning my stomach.
Well,
please.
Mark, what's the direction we're going here? Hey, I'm okay with it because, and I mean, at least from an Ohio State perspective, I'll say this from my own fan perspective. The format's just been laid out there. Ohio State has just chosen finally to go all in and do what they have to do to be competitive on this level. Texas A&M and these other programs, they tried to do it by buying a recruiting class. And Miami's trying to do it by buying recruits, like I said. And the team up north, you know what I mean? So,
you're right that Ohio State is playing completely within the rules. My issue as a college football fan is these rules, I think, are going to completely destroy the sport because I think there's just a level of inherent unfairness. Because as a fan of Kentucky, we can't compete with you all. There's nothing we can do.
No, that's where I was going just a second ago, Darrell. I don't think this is sustainable long term. I really don't think this is sustainable long term. And that's why I'm saying I think the NCAA will eventually have to come in. Now, whether that's a year from now, 2 years from now, I don't know. But I don't think this is sustainable long term. I mean, isn't that your feeling too, Mark?
I don't know that the NCAA is the organization to do it. I think that there's going to have to be some, and this is why a lot of top people in college football have reached out to, and everybody's going to cringe when I say this, and I don't know that this is the answer, but has gone to the federal government to try to get a handle on this. I don't know that either one of those avenues is the best direction. I think the best direction is for the 5 conferences, well, we're down to 4 conferences, get together and they determined how this should all be structured.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have a lot of faith in like the conferences, Mark, doing something that's right here?
Well, I know that there are a lot of bad relationships and angst between the conferences. So that's one part of it that I don't believe lends itself to them working together, is because they are pretty cutthroat and have been against each other. So I don't know if they're going to work together or not, but they at least have to work together enough to play bowl games and playoff games and schedule each other. So I know this is more of a infrastructure of governing the sport, but if they, I do think that if there's somebody who is strong enough and determined enough, smart enough to gain some level of not a consensus, but enough power brokers from the various conferences together and say, we all know we need to do something and we can do it in such a way that it's going to benefit all of our conferences, but this is coming apart at the seams and we can get a hold of our sport and do this the right way. The athletes are still going to make money, but we can protect the good of the sport and the popularity of the sport long term.
Well, Mark, there's something you said I would like to give some pushback on. I don't see the sport as 4 conferences anymore. I think it's 2 conference sport. And that's why I was talking about semi-pro being my issue. I mean, if you're the SEC and Big 10 and the ACC Big 12 tell you to do something, I would just laugh them out of the room. They have no power.
Right.
Well, nobody's going to be telling anyone to do anything.
Well, if they come up with recommendations or suggestions, they've got nothing else.
I'm not saying that this is an easy action to pursue, but I'm saying that it's possible.
Well, something that I knew right from the get-go when we talked about NIL, I think a year or 2 ago, Mark, is basically, you know, it's name, image, and likeness. I understood this from the get-go when it was first introduced. Like, if a player's jersey was sold at a store, that he could earn earnings off of that or earn money off of that. I correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, I think we're way past that, and now we're all of a sudden onto the point to where these players are employees of the university, as you guys were talking about here just a minute ago, and you know, we're at a point where we've gotten contracts now. We're at a point where I believe I've also heard that not only the players in college, but also high school players actually have agents representing them now, you know, to help them with these NIL deals. So I don't know.
Exactly. Quinshon Judkins, we'll just pick on a recent example, should not be entering the transfer portal. And number one, we can conclude, I don't know if it's completely factual, but conclude that he was going to Ohio State before he entered the transfer portal. Maybe, maybe not, but we can possibly that is a certain strong possibility. Number one. Number two, that Ohio State is down there recruiting him actively, and they're not the only one. They just were the winners here, so let's not blame Ohio State. But Georgia was there, and other suitors to gain Quinshon Judkins, but actively pursuing him, meeting with him. Mm-hmm. No, it should be that a player enters the transfer portal and contacts schools and coaches to say, what are my options here? What do you have to offer me in regards to everything? And if I need to go speak to a collective about what the opportunities are there, then I will. And you can certainly set that up for me. The athletes do need direction and help, but it's not the school coming with, here's $1 million. Oh, here's $1 million too. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Right. Well, did you read up on the Florida State situation about why they're in trouble? Well, Florida State was doing a recruiting visit for this transfer. I don't know if he was a transfer portal kid, but they were doing this visit, and he got in a car by Florida State and went to the NIL collective to negotiate his deal.
Yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah. See, I think the thing about it is, Mark, is you're getting to a point, though. I mean, because if you're going to have contracts, you're going to have agents. If they're, because the people that have advocated, is all these people advocated for a period of time. I believe that the players should get paid, or the players should get paid. Now, I was in the minority on that. I had said no, because be careful what you wish for. It's like whenever they talk about a really good government program, they never think about how they're going to pay for it, or what it's going to look like long term, or what the ramifications of the program are. They just think it sounds good in an idea, but where's the devil at? The devil's in the details. Somewhere I've heard that before, and they didn't think out the details, and they didn't think out how this thing would look, and it's become, pardon my Swahili, a shit show. And you had so many people out there because the coaches were making a lot of money. The revenue was coming into the schools. And on top of that, they were paying assistants $1.5 million to $2 million, that they basically says, well, why shouldn't the players get a lump sum? The players should get something. Never thinking about, well, you have this thing in the NFL called a salary cap, agents, contracts. You have a structure in the NFL. Are we saying we're going to go down the same road in college now? Then
okay, the only thing we're bypassing here is the way that this came to be was that we had student athletes who played a sport, and let's forget about all the cheating. Let's just talk about the way it was structured and the way it was supposed to operate. Was, of course, they got a scholarship, and then they were not allowed to have a job. They were not allowed to earn money outside of anything, really, in any such way. There was a determination that these schools, these conferences, and everyone is making $1 zillion off of these athletes. Therefore, they are entitled to at least earn, especially in this day and age, all the opportunities of name, image, and likeness. Therefore, starting on January 1st of whatever year that was at this point, 2021 or 22, that boom, this is now going forward an opportunity for these student athletes to be like any other American citizen who can go earn money if they have proven that they have celebrity or value and earn money. That's what was supposed to happen. So this couldn't have been stopped, because this is a legal right of every citizen to be able to earn money. However, it's obviously become distorted and completely skewed and been taken over by the schools into flat out paying the players.
Mark, that was an excellent point. The great Corey Brada wants to jump online. So you want to make this a full party and bring him on?
Sure. Here we go. Corey, what's going on tonight?
I got to ask, what did Drill MVP just say about the Florida State situation? Or as I said in the private chat, the fake MVP.
From my understanding of it, Florida State recruit our player, transfer player, I'm not sure which. They had a car given to this, they transported this player through a car to the NIL collective.
Okay.
To negotiate.
What's your point?
Well, that's against the rules.
What's against the rules?
The university can't be one directly related to NIL. They have to be two separate organizations. And
what does him going straight to the collective have anything to do with the university?
Because the university was the one that offered him the car to get there. That was my understanding from the story.
That offered him the car to get there.
Yeah, they gave him a car to go to the NIL collective to negotiate.
They gave him a vehicle, or they gave him a ride.
A ride. That's a better way of putting it, Corey. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to clear that up, because I'm not trying to rip on you, but like that is happening all the time. That happens everywhere all the time. So
Yeah,
I mean, I
agree
don't
with
know.
that.
I'm just like, okay, they gave him a ride. Big deal. That's not the problem at hand. The problem at hand is the entire structure of what's happening right now. Like, so what if this university gave him a ride? Like, okay, the university gave him a $50 Uber ride. Okay, there are bigger fish to fry right now than that.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is because that's one of the things the NCAA is tackling right now.
Well,
Yeah, you can criticize the NCAA for tackling that and not everything else, but that's what they're going after.
yeah, the NCAA is a bunch of morons. How about that? How about we just say that? It's a bunch of
That's
Probably
morons.
new news, but yeah.
Okay.
Early.
It's like these morons, and you probably saw this tweet that I put out there earlier today, Mark, about this. I don't even know who is Mike Farrell. Who is he, and why do we care about him? That's my question. Drill MVP. What? Who is he?
I don't really know who he is.
Okay, well, I don't know why he's all of a sudden like these people that literally get these agendas just to start attacking either a certain entity or a certain athlete or a coach or whatever. I mean, it's very much similar to the Colin Cowherd crap from 8 years ago. And this guy's going after Caden Proctor because he made a comment about how Iowa. So he made a comment over the weekend about how when he was struggling at Alabama, someone from Iowa gave him some encouragement and just said, "Keep your head up." First of all, that comment was made via Twitter in response to a stupid comment that Mike Farrell made about how Iowa fans should be celebrating Caden Proctor's struggles at Alabama. And now Mike Farrell comes out with some column about Iowa needs to be made an example of. Are you kidding me? Like, you realize the amount of, that's why I laugh at even addressing an issue like, oh, he was given a ride to the collective. Who cares? Like, you got millions of dollars. The whole structure of this is the problem. Like, this is I don't understand, why do people not realize that the whole idea of a collective is in order, I don't know how other schools are doing it, but at Iowa, the collective is in charge of getting extra opportunities away from the field for athletes that choose to play at Iowa. And are there negotiations going on for kids to give them incentives to come to the school? Sure. Of course, that's the very problem with what we have here. But there's no way to fix that. Okay. And I just think I hear a lot of these little issues, and that's what kind of got under my skin about that story. Not that that's your fault, Darrell, but like it kind of goes back to the Mike Farrell thing. It's like these people who are trying to act like they're shocked that these things are happening, these little menial things, when these much bigger issues are happening all the time.
Hey,
So,
Corey,
Corey,
It's like the crap that we hear about Iowa. You remember back in the day when Iowa got busted for athletes taking pictures with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis? Meanwhile, you got Coach K just consistently throughout his career on pretty good authority committing NCAA violations out the wazoo, and you've got the FBI scandal at Kansas, and we care about athletes taking pictures with Ashton Kutcher at an Iowa game. I mean, give me a break.
Mark, I wanted to ask Corey a quick question, if I could, since we were talking about this NIL situation. Did you have these issues, or did you have these concerns about NIL when it was introduced, let's say a few years ago, that the train would get off the tracks and this would be we'd be at where we're at right now?
I wish I could say I was smart enough to foresee that coming, but no.
Okay.
I think it was stupid. I mean, as you probably know, David, my intel, who I try to rely on, the people that have been in the sport a lot longer than I have, and Don Patterson on our show has made the comment over and over again about how the NCAA had years to get ahead of this thing. And it really comes down. That's why, like, it's so ridiculous that the NCAA is still even involved in trying to, in some way, in some fashion, oversee what's happening and potential violations and tampering in this garbage, when they're the very reasons we're in this. They're the exact reason we're in this position we are now, and they can't do anything about it because they put this off the table, so to speak, for so many years until the federal government had to step in and say, "Oh, you have no right to do this. You're done." And so there literally is. I don't see any way out of this other than the NCAA just can no longer be involved with the sport.
Yeah, but
The only thing I'll say,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
real quick, Dave,
Yeah.
is to piggyback off of the question that you presented, Corey, was, yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I was smart enough to figure out or to forecast this situation. But number one, shoot, I should repost some of these videos. I posted a video talking about Johnny Manziel. This is in 2013, talking about Johnny Manziel. Of course, he got suspended the first half of the first game of the season for apparently signing autographs, although the NCAA couldn't prove that he signed autographs, but they still suspended him. So they said there's no issue. We couldn't substantiate that, but they still suspended him. And I posted a video right there saying this needs to be dealt with right now, because this is just going to open the floodgates, and we are going to get to a position where what are we going to do with these student athletes that are rightful beneficiaries to their name, image, and likeness? But man, for 8 to 9 years, nobody did anything about it. But then they finally allowed it, but didn't do anything to structure it.
But the thing about it is, Mark, and I would say this to Corey, I also say this to Real. Before NIL was even introduced, I was saying the NCAA was a worthless organization way before NIL was even heard from. So if we always thought that the NCAA was a worthless organization before NIL even came along, then what was our confidence once NIL was introduced that a worthless organization that we always knew was a worthless organization was going to enforce anything or deal with it or regulate it or do the necessary things to rein it in?
No. Hold on a second, David. I didn't have any confidence the NCAA could regulate it.
Okay.
This whole thing had to be taken to the Supreme Court because of their incompetence. So no, once that happened, it's not that I felt like they'd be able to reel this whole thing in. Had they been proactive years ago and figured out a way, and it wouldn't have been that hard at the time to involve players in revenue sharing, then this wouldn't have been a Supreme Court issue. And sure, they but once you can see the incompetence to where I don't even know how to describe the dynamic that is now the NCAA and college football and legalities behind this and the precedents that have been set. There's, you talk about there's no putting the toothpaste back in the bottle. That is the perfect analogy for this situation. Right. Because there's no way to regulate it because the NCAA has been forced to allow it. And yet the NCAA is the only one that can regulate it. Like there's nobody else in charge of regulating it. The federal government's not going to regulate it. They don't care. Like Mark said, anybody can make whatever they want to do anything. And that's fine. That's society.
Well, Corey, you were always an advocate for paying the players.
No, I wasn't. No, I was not. But I'm an advocate. Listen, I was always an advocate for NIL. I was always an advocate for NIL. It made no sense that players could not make money off their name, image, and likeness.
Well, see, my thing was, and I said this to Mark a year or so ago, I said that the people that were advocating NIL, a majority of them always just wanted to pay the players anyway, and that this was their way to eventually get there.
No, I had no issue with NIL at all. The problem is how we got here. And because we got to NIL, the route that we took the stupid route, right? That's what we did. We took the stupid route. We took the route where we have no control over it. If it had been introduced in a controlled environment, in a controlled fashion, we could be at a very healthy place right now. We could actually have the true essence of NIL taking place, where players are cutting ads for car dealerships and working for charities and making good money, or potentially have collectives that are actually collectives, and the NCAA could have maintained some healthy level of a power and authority and supervision. Instead, we took the dumb route, we took the stupid route to this location, and we have no way to intercept it. So, like I said, the only solution I foresee is somehow the sport breaks away, and I don't even know, Mark would have a better idea what that would potentially look like. From a logistics standpoint, I don't know what that would look like. How does that even occur at this point? That the incident that somehow college football breaks away and they're just completely separate, and you have a legislative power or czar or whatever you want to call it that can actually enforce something. and regulate something that unfortunately had to be taken to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, just to play off of what Corey is talking about, the mission of the NCAA is to govern and lead the sport. At some point in a conversation a few months ago, I thought I'm going to go back and look to see what is the mission statement of the NCAA. What is their description of their existence? And it's to lead the sport. So they have gone from some theoretical leadership position. I don't know that they ever led the sport at any point. Maybe they did back in the 50s and 60s, or at some point in history did lead the sport, but they're not supposed to just be this disciplinary entity. That's what they've dragged themselves into and just allowed themselves to be. Basically, they don't even police the sport. They're not even doing that. They're basically responding to situations where schools, individuals turn in other schools, and then they go investigate it. That's what they do. They're not leading the sport. They're not overviewing the sport and saying, okay, what is good for the sport? We're going to take initiative to restructure the sport because these are the problems that have arisen through the year. No, they haven't done any of those things. So they're just a policing. And again, I won't even call them a policing organization because they're not even doing that. They only follow up when they are given a lead to follow up, to investigate. So to Corey's point, I believe, and I started down this path before Corey and Dave jumped on, that I believe it's up to the conference commissioners and the power that be within those conferences to get together and say, let's put some of our conference allegiance and what is just simply best to make money for our specific conference, but look at the good of the sport. That's what all professional sports do. They act in the best interest of the sport, not the best interest of the Green Bay Packers or the New York Giants or the NFC East. They look out for the entire sport. How can we now structure this sport from all standpoints, from conference affiliation standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, from a NIL and transfer portal standpoint? How can we do all these things? Of course, we've got to abide by the law, the federal and state laws, but how can we do this to, yes, the SEC and the Big Ten may not be able to trample everyone going forward, but may need to give a little. And let's do what's best for the sport. So this is a thriving sport in 50 years and not a thriving Big Ten and SEC for 15 years, and then a depiction of the MLS or something in 50 years, and it's not nearly as popular or impactful on the national scene.
Mark, imagine a parent, right? Imagine a parent that has rightful authority over his or her own children. So imagine, take the real MVP's 7.5 children that he has. Imagine if those 7.5 children no longer were able to be, reeled in or parented by drill MVP, because drill MVP, figured out a way to malnourish his children, right? He wasn't taking care of his children. So the authorities come in and say, you no longer have a right to say what your child eats, where your child goes, or what he does. They're still going to be they're still going to be under your authority, right? You're still the parent, you're the legal guardian, but you can't enforce anything. That's where we're at with NIL right now, right? Yeah. It's not that the Supreme Court's had the power or the authority to say the NCAA can no longer regulate college football. They're just saying you can no longer do this or this. And it's such a big part of the sport now that it's total. And you may say, well, it's totally dysfunctional. That would never happen with a parent and child relationship. Well, yeah, it is dysfunctional, and it wouldn't work, because that's the whole point of a parent, right? To love and to support your child and guide your child. The NCAA's whole job, like you said earlier, is to direct and supervise and enforce rules and rules that are made supposed to be for the best interest of the student athletes. And instead, now it's a free-for-all.
And again, just to underline one last point, not just to enforce and discipline and do all those things, but to have a vision for the future. So they're supposed to be leading the sport, not just reacting to things that are happening and say, oh, this is a problem now, we got to respond and react to it. No, they're supposed to be leading the sport, saying, okay, athletes are getting an idea that, oh, billions and billions of dollars are being made, that they should, all they had to do is look around and say, and they were right in the middle of it and being the target of punitive actions that were initiated by Northwestern to start a union, all these other things, and they just dealt with the Band-Aid approach of, well, we just have to fight this battle, this court battle, but they didn't lead to say, this is going to continue to be a problem in different ways. Let's do something to structure our sport so we can allow the freedom of freedom of choice, the freedom of earning money outside of the sport based on celebrity, but give it guardrails and structure so the sport's healthy.
I'll tell you what, there ought to be no, from a structural standpoint, there ought to be no, this should obviously be throughout the sport, there ought to be no contact between a student athlete and another independent body.
Yes.
That is able to in any way negotiate or talk financial gain in association with attendance to that school. So I know with the Iowa Swarm, the main NIL collective for Iowa, they are not able to tell an athlete, hey, we'll give you this much if you come here. But what they're able to tell an athlete, and this is within the rules, they're able to tell him, if you're in good standing and you fulfill these obligations, then this is what you'd be able to make.
Yes.
Well, the players have agents right now. They have representation, as far as I know, Corey. Even high school players coming out of high school, I think, have representation right now, or they have some type of agents from what I'm hearing. I don't know if you knew that, if you're noticing that.
Yeah, a lot of them do. I mean, not all of them. I mean, we're talking maybe bigger.
Okay.
It's almost in a sense like, let's strip away the athlete part of it and just say, for any student that's going to a university, for the university to say, in addition to this is all that we have available for you in student life, all the social activities, the academics, we have these majors that are available to you, all these things, we're going to guarantee grades. That's almost what this is. This is saying, if you come to our school, you're going to get straight A's. We're going to guarantee that. No, we need to get back into a position where the athletic program of that sport, the university, the coaching staff, everything continues to recruit those players as they always have, and can present the NIL collective as Corey just outlined, but there are no guarantees. And as soon as there is contact between the student athlete in such a way that before they are enrolled at the school, have signed a scholarship, that is illegal and enforced. And
what would be the problem with from a legality standpoint? Whether it's, again, I don't trust the NCAA with a bar of soap, but if you're talking about the conference commissioners, or if you had a governing body like a czar or whatever in place for the sport as a whole, what would be the issue with saying, okay, especially as the conference is concerned, we're going to revenue share, and I don't know how much that would mean, per year for each player, but if we're actually revenue sharing, which is where this is headed, that you say, hey, as a contractual agreement, as part of the revenue share, in order for you to be entitled to your $80,000 a year or whatever we're going to pay you based on what what you're getting as far as TV revenue of the university and the sport is concerned, in order for you to receive that $80,000 a year, you have to sign an agreement that states you're not going to. It's basically like a non-compete, where you're not allowed to work for anybody else during that time period.
I think we have two problems. I think the one problem would be who makes how much money. Meaning, if Cade McNamara is the starting quarterback and Deacon Hill's the backup, do they both make the same amount of money? Or is it determined that the starter's worth more than the backup, and by how much?
Well, I think that's where we have to be. We have to figure out a way to to structure that so that starters make what they deserve to some extent, scholarship players make what they deserve, and walk-ons should be able to make some money.
And that was always my problem with paying the players in college, is because I mean, who gets what? You know, does the starter get this? Does the backups get this? Basically, what Mark is saying is,
and it's
what's
more
the system?
convoluted than that, of course.
Well,
You-
but those are the basics.
You know,
of
what's
what I
Marvin
was,
Harrison Jr. going to make versus the starting wide receiver at Indiana?
right? Exactly.
Why?
Well, like,
but hold on a second though. Isn't that where we want to be? Don't we want to create equality across the conference to where
Equality?
equality as it relates to we shouldn't be incentivizing kids to go certain places because there are better financial opportunities. If you have equality across the conference, then the conference is sharing revenue, or the conference is setting a revenue share format to where each school is able to equally share this amount with the starters, this amount with the reserves, this amount with the walk-ons.
I understand and can fight for and support your position in principle, but the one reason it doesn't work is because Ohio State makes so much more money for the conference than pick out your school.
But that's what revenue sharing is, Mark.
Why should they be, but if they make so much more money, then why should they be dragged down to only being able to quote unquote pay players at the same level as Northwestern and Rutgers?
Because Mark, the Ohio State's not making any more off the Big Ten TV deal than Indiana is.
No, they're not, but they still make a lot more money.
Correct.
Yep.
But back in the day, before we went down this rabbit hole, that didn't make a difference because players got what they got, and that was a scholarship. And I'm not saying that was a perfect regimen, but we need to return to some form of normalcy.
So before David goes, because it sounds like he's got some things to say, let me clarify two things. And I love your point if it could be executed, but there's two major reasons why I don't think it could be. Number one, the determination of who makes what, I just think is a convoluted mess. You know, are we going to rate every offensive lineman and say, well, you really don't have statistics for us to, or even if you have statistics, then we're going to have an argument over, well, I didn't get as many targets as he got. And so I just think that's a convoluted mess in and of itself, to pay the players based on their play in the game. We need to get back to, they get a scholarship, they're getting paid, they have the opportunity to go out and earn true NIL money. Regardless, there's no cap on it. We can't tell Chevrolet if they want to pay JULIAN SAYIN, if they want to pay him $10 million, he's an American citizen. If Chevrolet wants to show up and pay me $10 million, there's nobody to say, nope, you can't earn that. There's no cap on that. And I'm not saying that that's good for an 18-year-old, but it's just the way it is. And we live in a free society. So I don't believe in paying the players. I just believe in putting guardrails and structure to the NIL collectives.
Well, see, a couple things on that, Mark. Number one, can I advocate Mark Rogers for NCAA commissioner right now? We'll get you another job here, Mark. Are you ready to take that one on?
I would love to do the fun things, like we're going to fix the scheduling system. We're going to this legality business. Well, goodness gracious.
Well, to your point about, them, my thing is, the one thing about going that route with the NIL, my other thing is the boosters. And a lot of people look at them, in certain ways, shapes, or forms as saying they have a negative effect on college football. Because what was that theory years ago, that they would get the players to come work at their car dealership and they wouldn't even have to work? They would just come in there and they'd get some money for not doing anything or something like that. They would create these types of jobs where they didn't even have to come in, and then they'd be compensated for it. I still think that's something that's, I don't know, how we regulate it and how we go about doing this. Again, you're going to have to show me the details. I do think this thing is unsustainable, and I think that the NCAA, or well, I hope it's not the federal government down the road, but hopefully it is the NCAA comes in, because I think they're going to have no choice but to do so here within the next year or two, just in my view, bottom line, because this thing is unsustainable. I had heard, by the way, that this is a major reason that Saban got out. I don't know if you guys heard that too, but he basically bemoaned the whole NIL situation and was a major reason that he decided to step down. But
if I had a choice like Jim Harbaugh to coach in the NFL or coach college football, it wouldn't even be a thought in my mind.
Yeah, that's the other thing. This is going to drive more coaches away from the sport, they're saying too. Even with the amount of money that they're paying college coaches now, which is astronomical.
Oh, it's
right. And the NFL is up in their pay raise. I mean, Sean Payton's making like 18 million. Bill Belichick's at 25. So I think the NFL.
Regardless, let me work with professionals, and I know some of them run off the rails or whatever, but let me work with an average of 25 to 28-year-old professionals, and let me have a general manager and a player personnel director who work the draft, ask for my input, but work the draft, work free agency, all this, supply me with a roster that I can just coach football, show up and talk and speak and glad hand some people. But besides that, I'm just coaching a football team. I don't have to worry about our players going to class. I don't even have to worry to the extent that these coaches have to worry about, which has been going on for generations, have to worry about them dealing drugs or getting DUIs or anything. The league takes care of that. If my starting outside linebacker gets pulled over for DUI, it's none of my business. That's a league issue. They deal with it. All of that, just on and on and on. NIL, transfer portal. No, there are structures to free agency. I only can be concerned that only a handful of my players are eligible for free agency. The rest of them I know are coming back, or we're going to cut them because they're not good enough. But otherwise, I've got the confidence that we're going to have 35 to 40 of these 53 players back next year. Oh, the differences in headaches are just in two different stratospheres.
Yeah, but in college, it used to be you were in control of the roster. Remember, in college, you're not only the coach, but you're also the general manager and the owner in many ways, because you can control your own roster. And plus, you have talent, disparities in college that you don't have in the NFL. The NFL, every school's Alabama in the NFL. I mean, it's a grind week in and week out. Whereas college, I mean, if you're at a certain program, you should have a built-in 7 or 8 wins a year, depending on, if you're at a major program. So, I mean, there are also benefits to that. And college compensation, I mean, the top college coaches are getting, $10 million a year right now, $9-10 million. So, I mean, that's not necessarily all bad. Although with the things they have to deal with right now, I tend to agree with you, Mark. It's becoming.
Those guys are football coaches, and they deal with grown men. Sure, there are various personalities and egos and all that to deal with, but absolutely, for everything I just cited and more, I would be an NFL head coach. And I would have said that 5 years ago. It's only been multiplied 50 times by NIL and transfer portal.
Yeah. Tend to agree.
In recruiting, I have always said I would want no part in that.
Well, also, wouldn't you? It depend on the job, though, Mark. Right? I mean, if you got,
still wouldn't want any part of it, because
okay,
it's easier to recruit to. We could name the schools, but the standard is also exponentially higher that you have to hit. So you better get those guys, as opposed to look at the situation for any of the 32 NFL teams. We're in the draft. We're on even par with everyone else. Anyone we draft, unless it's a one in a generational situation like John Elway or Eli Manning, they have to play for us.
Yeah, but though you could get into a situation like Harbaugh did, where him and Trent Baalke didn't get along, and then he eventually wanted to get out of San Francisco.
Yeah, but
you also have to find maybe a general manager that you're simpatico with.
Well, that can happen anywhere. You've got to get along with the athletic director.
That's true, and that's also happening to Harbaugh right now with Ward Manuel, I think, to a certain extent. I hear they're not on the best of terms. always.
So since this is the transfer portal show, we'll give everybody an update. Iowa DB Brendan Diaz-Fernandez has committed to Central Michigan, Mark.
This is why this show was created, for news just like that, to help us stay in front of MAC personnel decisions.
Hey, and
Absolutely.
that is per Brendan Diaz-Fernandez. This is what Brendan Diaz-Fernandez tells me personally, Mark. Brendan
Well
has
done.
told me that he's committed to. I mean, that is true. He did tell me this, but emphasis on the he tells me this.
Hey,
Central Michigan.
both
All
Nick
right.
Saban and Mark Rogers came from the MAC, so let's show some appreciation to the MAC here. So
That's right.
both
Yeah.
proud alums of Kent State University.
That's right.
So,
Along with Lou Holtz,
that's right.
Jack Lambert. We
That's
can keep
right.
going.
Yeah,
Antonio Gates, Josh Cribbs.
lots of
Josh
good players.
Cribbs.
That's right.
I am not coming up with the first name of the Steelers defensive end, Harrison, that had
James
the
James Harrison.
James Harrison. Yes. Absolutely. And Julian Edelman, Kent
right.
State.
Former quarterback now, went receiver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm about to post a video about Brendan Diaz-Fernandez going to Central Michigan. How many hits do I get?
2,879.
2879.
Yes.
He must have a lot of family and friends.
Maybe I lowballed you on that one. I apologize if I did. I think
No,
anything you throw out there automatically gets 2,000 to 2,500 regardless. Have you done your soliloquy on the Caitlin Clark incident? You
no,
should.
but we talked about it yesterday on the post-game show.
You need to do a separate video on
Should
that.
I just cut that file out and
Yeah, just do that. Put that off. That'll blow up. People are talking about that all. I had no idea that anything happened, and then I see clips all over Twitter about people all upset that she's a drama queen and all. I'm like, you can't tell this from just watching.
Wait a minute, what? They're upset because of what?
That she's a drama queen and she flopped and she this and that. And I'm like, you know what?
She didn't flop. They ran into each other. They were running in opposite directions.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm seeing on social media.
Wow.
Corey, big Iowa women's basketball fan. You follow the program?
He covers them.
Oh, that's right. I didn't know that.
Absolutely.
I did not know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm assuming you're not, David.
I don't follow women's basketball closely. Haven't been in on Ohio State women's basketball since the Katie Smith years.
Oh man!
So take you way back
30 years ago.
Yeah, that was way back when they fell to Cheryl Swoops in the NCAA finals.
Yes, I
Well,
did
Cheryl
watch
Swoops.
that game.
Yeah, she was.
You don't
awesome.
know Cheryl Swoops?
No, I
Really?
Should I know who Cheryl Swoops is?
She was good.
I would consider her to be maybe the most famous women's basketball player of all time. What do you think, David?
Would you put Cheryl Miller up there? Or?
Listen, I know who Cheryl Miller is.
Not that I'm an expert on the subject. I shouldn't be commenting because the only women's college basketball games I've ever watched in my life, I was paid to watch.
Sue Bird.
Sue Bird. Okay.
Candace Parker,
Where did she go to school? Tennessee, right?
Tennessee.
Very good. Okay.
Rebecca Lobo. I don't know. Would she still be up there?
Yeah,
I don't know.
sure.
Yep. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have devoted way too much time.
Once we've devolved into women's basketball here, I that might be the tipping point, right?
We have just named more women's basketball players in the span of 20 seconds than in the history of this channel.
Well,
I think about 10 to 0.
Hey, by the way, I may call the real MVP in all reality the fake MVP, but I do appreciate him being a proud supporter of Hawkeye hoops, especially women's hoops.
I don't understand what you just said, Corey. You are proud of him being a supporter of women's hoops and Iowa's women's hoops, but you just called him the fake MVP.
Well, whenever he says something that I don't agree with,
Okay.
I have to call him out. It's the easiest, it's like having I'm trying to think of a name that back in the day you'd get made fun of for. Like, there's lots of what's a good name, David, that of someone back in school, grade school, that it was an easy one to make fun of, right? Like if your last name is like Iowa has a player on their team, Josh Dix, Dix, like
Yeah,
obviously
there you
you're gonna
go.
get made
There you
fun
go.
of, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, Drill MVP, his mom named him Drill MVP. I'm gonna call him the fake MVP.
Greatest sports name of all time was the goaltender Ron Tugnut.
Okay, there's
Still
that.
one of the
Philadelphia
all-time
Flyers,
great,
I believe.
Yes.
And then there was this one that Dan Patrick loved to say, because he would always say the name and then he would just let it. And it was a NASCAR driver, Dick Trickle.
Dick Trickle. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that name. Yeah. That's one for the books right there.
Yeah.
By the way, congratulations to your Chiefs there, Darrell. Nice win yesterday.
I mean, it's just what you expect. Honestly, if we win the Super Bowl this year, I'll still be disappointed because, they've lost 7 games, and that's just unacceptable.
Oh, my word.
Jeez.
Stop it.
When you're chasing Brady,
Stop
you
it.
can't have these types of.
Stop it.
I mean, can you imagine, Mark, being a fan of an NFL team that's won 2 playoff games in like 30 years and claiming you're the best team of all time and
Well,
treating it
David
as if you're
can.
Super Bowl winning a divisional playoff game? How sad that has to be.
David can imagine that.
Yes, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. What do you want out of my life over here? It's been pretty hard.
How does it feel, David, when you see someone like Baker Mayfield go down to Tampa Bay and just look like how does that feel?
Well, I was always a little suspect of the Watson move when the Browns made it.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
but you know what though, Baker that last year was pretty rough though. He got
Are you
hurt.
wait?
hurt,
You're not a fan of massage therapy?
He's got to take it in that direction.
Yeah, why'd you have to go there, Corey?
Yeah, we were thinking football.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, of course.
Yes. Well, I know
Right.
when Deshaun Watson names comes up, you had to go there, so I wasn't surprised.
You do not overpay players to come play for you and beg them to come play. If they don't want to play for you, you know what? There's plenty of other guys that will come and play. That turned me off to that whole deal right there.
To be fair, a lot of teams wanted. New Orleans was willing to pony up a lot for Watson, and I think Atlanta was going to pony up a lot for Watson. It was just that the Browns, way overbid for him, and could be paying for it.
David, you got fully guaranteed money to Deshaun Watson. Now, what is it, like $64 million of fully guaranteed money?
Yeah, I think that's kicking in within the next year or two, though. Too, they deferred some of that early money that first year of that deal. Of course, he was suspended 11 games to start with, so that wasn't exactly the best thing ever. Although I still think that suspension was the NFL overreaching a little bit, in my view. But
David, it's just like Brown's organization history: sacrifice the future for the present, and sacrifice the present for the future.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, not everybody can score that generational quarterback, though. Darrell. It's those guys are tough to come by. Let's put it that way.
There were about 10 or 15 teams that had the opportunity to grab him.
Well, I liked Watson coming out of Clemson with those two.
About Mahomes, but yeah.
Well, I agree. No, but the same draft, by the way, both Mahomes and Watson. But I liked Watson coming out of Clemson. Like, those 2 championship games against Alabama won me over. The fact that, he carried that team, because I think that 16 team that Clemson won with was not a loaded NFL roster, So.
I agree.
But.
Yeah, he did well until, Kansas City, the best dynasty maybe of all time, completely shattered the Texans' spirit and morale when they were up 28 and lost by 20 in the same game.
Dynasty of all time.
Possibly.
Well,
possibly.
Yeah, once it ends, but it is currently not in that discussion.
If the Kansas City wins the Super Bowl this year, they would have won 3 out of 6 Super Bowls. They would have been to 6 straight AFC championship games.
I think you got your work cut out for you this weekend, Darrell. I think Baltimore looks
Baltimore is probably going to destroy this Kansas City team. Baltimore is maybe one of the best teams ever. There's a legitimate case they should be undefeated right now.
Yeah, we were fortunate to get him in Baltimore early in the year. By the way, one of the few good games Deshaun Watson actually played.
And David, I'm going to take full credit if the Ravens win because Lamar Jackson went to the state of Kentucky to play college football. So I'm
Unfortunately,
going to take
Louisville,
full
but-
credit.
Real quick, are we all aware? I know this doesn't involve the transfer portal, Mark, and I don't want to just send this show into the dumps, but are we all aware that Tommy Reese is headed to the Browns?
No, please, no.
No,
You didn't
please.
know that? You didn't know that?
No, I was hearing Ken Dorsey rumors the other day.
No, it's this was just reported by On3 here about an hour ago. Zach Jackson of The Athletic apparently got it first that the Browns are currently trying to negotiate a deal for Tommy Reese. So
yeah, I see it here.
he is apparently going to be coming in to coach tight ends, and he's a guy that Iowa fans kind of were hopeful that Kirk would reach out to because of his connections with Saban.
Well, no, but Notre Dame fans didn't want Tommy Reese.
No.
You
Well,
know?
remember, listen, this is all relative. So if Iowa fans want him, there's a reason why Iowa fans would want him.
Iowa fans are looking for an offensive-minded guy. That's interesting, Corey.
Does that defy logic?
Corey, can I ask you? Let's say Iowa doesn't hire anyone to be offensive coordinator. Would that be better than last year?
Well, who's calling plays?
I have
Kirk
told
Ferentz.
Corey. I have told Corey that he should be giving the nod over me because with his access to the program and his
Oh yeah,
all of that beyond me. But either one of us were just handed the playbook about a month before the season started and just stood on the sideline on game day and just called plays out. I just can't imagine that we would produce offenses that are about 25 yards worse than the second to worst offense in the country and would get shut out. Like that would have been a great case sample right there. Put Corey on the Iowa sideline with the playbook and see, let's play Penn State, Tennessee, and Michigan and see if we can kick a field goal.
You know what's crazy about this? And now I'm going to sound like a total homer and nobody's going to agree with this in the Iowa fan base. But I'm just telling you this right now. If Iowa was like, if Kirk were willing to do this, and I don't ever talk about it on my channel because it would sound way too homerish, but I'll say it here. If Kirk were willing to at least consult with Don Patterson, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I talk to Don every week. The guy still has it, all right? He is not, he's not like he's some geriatric that's about to check himself into an institution. He knows what's happening. He understands football. He was a really good offensive mind. He understands quarterback play. Like, I guarantee you, Don Patterson could make this offense a crap ton better in a few months. In a few months. Now, I've never advocated for him to be the next OC because he's 73 years old. Like, they do need somebody younger, but I mean, like, if they were desperate enough, Mark, that's what that's what Kirk ought to do. Like, if you get to a point where there's just nobody that's really a legitimate candidate, he needs to get on the phone and call Don and say, Don, can you give us 1 year? It's going to be hard to recruit, but give us a year. I don't know that I'm going to be here after this year. I'm going to have a lot of changes in 2025. Give me 1 year, work with these guys, see what we can do with this roster. That's what I'd be doing.
If we can have a president who's 80, why can't we have an offensive coordinator who's 73?
Oh, Don, I'm telling you, Don could do it. I'm telling you, Don could do it. But, he won't.
In football, there's that need to find that hot, young offensive mind. Look at that guy for Houston right now, Bobby Slowick. He's really, wanted after what he did this year with Houston in that offense. Everybody's kind of looking for that. He always seems to be looking for that guy. Joe Brady was the hot name a few years ago.
Well, I mean, I don't really care about, frankly, I don't care about age. It just doesn't bother me. You're talking about a position where Iowa's had a pretty young guy at that position. I think it's, if anybody's going to realize that good coaching does not necessarily have any direct correlation with how many years you've been live, it's the situation we've observed with Brian Ferentz over the last 6 to 7 years.
It's a wonder he wouldn't have had to have started at like a smaller school and kind of work his way up. Or I mean, it just I don't know.
That's a wonder. That's a wonder to you.
Well, I mean, it was nepotism. It goes back to nepotism at its worst, I guess, is what it all comes back to, right? I mean,
Corey and I have had this discussion many times, and I'll summarize my response that Corey has had to endure probably 15 or 20 times. If this is me and this is my son, and we're not talking about we run the local hardware store. No, our product, our performance is out there for a public to evaluate, and we are serving the state of Iowa. We are the highest paid employees in the state. I am not doing that to myself. I'm not putting myself under that kind of scrutiny, and I am sure as hell am not putting my son under that kind of scrutiny. And I'm Kirk Ferentz, and I've got generations, decades in the sport and equity across the nation with all sorts of contacts. I am picking up the phone. I'm getting my son a really good job, whether that's as an offensive line coach or an offensive coordinator at Georgia Southern or Utah State or wherever it might be. And that's phenomenal. That's a dad supporting and getting his son off to a great start in his career. And I know he had previous jobs, so not even getting him a start in his career, but not even putting yourself in that position to fail, have your son fail, and have it displayed in front of the nation.
And by the way, to blank name in the chat, does Don chart the game still? If he does, yes, it's okay to hire him. If not, I doubt he still has the drive to coach. Don has the drive. Now, he's not looking for a job, but he lives in Iowa City. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if they needed him for 1 year, I guarantee you he would consider that strongly.
Corey, how old was Norm Parker? I mean, he had to be in his 70s, wasn't he?
That's a good question. How old was Norm Parker? You'd have to Google that. I don't have an answer for that.
I don't think he was a spring chicken. I mean, he, I thought it was.
No, he wasn't. Too. No, he wasn't. He was, if I recall, I don't know, in his early years, I know he was in the box most of what I remember him as the DC.
It's looking like mid-60s for his final years.
Okay.
Yeah, and his health deteriorated. Of course, he's passed on now, but Kirk isn't a young guy anymore. So, I don't I've never really understood the idea that you got to find some young guy because all of a sudden young means,
cutting
explosive.
Edge or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kirk's not going to go cutting edge regardless. So just hire the best person for the job. That's why I thought Paul Chryst was a decent option. Now, Paul Chryst didn't want the job. So, if I'm an Iowa fan, I don't want Paul Chryst if he's not invested and he's not serious about it. Move on. But I think the only thing you can blame Kirk for right now, looking at it from the perspective of we've known this whole time he wasn't going to go way outside his vision and his comfort zone. The only thing you can blame Kirk Ferentz for is sitting on that offer or allowing Chris to sit on that offer for as long as he did. And now we're approaching the last week of January and we have no idea who the coach is going to be. And by the way, I've been told there's a decent chance that we get hear a name by the end of the month, but it's unlikely to be this week. And if you don't somehow get a guy by the end of January, then I do think you enter panic mode. And I don't know what that looks like at that point.
I mean, Corey, you just need a body. You need somebody. You need literally anybody just to build. Because honestly, Corey, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Iowa doesn't even have a foundation on offense.
But Darrell, listen, just say we need a body.
Just anybody, literally anybody. Get some guy off the street. He can probably do a better job.
They've had somebody over the last 7 years, and it's been a train wreck. No, they need a candidate. They need a qualified candidate. Like, you can't just say, well, we've tried. We're going to hire, Tim Prangley. Like, that's not how it works.
Well, I understand. Don't get somebody like I meant get somebody, even if it's at the Division II or Division III run. That's unproven.
I'm okay with an out of the box hire. I even made the throughout the idea of maybe you look at the most high powered offenses in the high school ranks. Is there somebody at that level that nobody knows about, or somebody at the JUCO level that nobody knows about. I guarantee you there are people out there, and that involves work. But what I don't want Iowa to do, what Kirk should not do, and I don't think he will. Like, don't go just, oh, I guess we'll promote John Budmeyer. Like, holy crap, man. That's a disaster waiting to happen.
Hey, Mark, I didn't get a chance to hear your video from Ohio State perspective. What were your thoughts on the Bill O'Brien hire?
Well, I think that it's a solid hire, more so from the standpoint of not that he's going to prove to be the most prolific offensive coordinator in mankind. It's more about relieving Ryan Day of game day duties to be able to focus on being a head coach. And that Bill O'Brien also can supplement some of those head coaching duties. I think it's a really good hire.
So wait, hold on a second. What is happening with what's his face?
Brian Hartline.
Ryan Day.
What's happened with Hartline?
Well, I still think he might keep the title, but I don't think he's going to be doing play calling.
No.
I mean, I think that there was a need. Ohio State, I think, really missed Kevin Wilson more than they thought they were going to miss Kevin Wilson this year, who was kind of like having another coach up in the box that, he's obviously, Wilson was a guy that was an experienced guy that's called plays before, good offensive mind. And I think O'Brien can be that. I think it's a solid hire. I actually would use the same term Mark did, where I think it's a solid hire. I don't think it's a great hire. There was a couple of guys I would have liked maybe a little bit better. The one name that kept coming to me, Mark, was Joe Moorhead, who I liked, who did a really good job with those Penn State offenses in 16 and 17, and then schemed us up with that Oregon team in a couple of years ago when they came into the shoe. So I that was the one name I liked. I wouldn't have minded a Joe Brady, but I don't know if they could have gotten a Joe Brady either. But I think O'Brien is just a solid hire because he's an experienced offensive mind. And I know the Alabama fans weren't the craziest about Bill O'Brien, but he did have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and they did, I believe, have top 10 offenses, those 2 years with Bryce Young. I mean, just because he wasn't Sark doesn't mean he didn't do a solid job. And I still firmly believe if Jamison Williams doesn't get hurt, Alabama wins that national championship game over Georgia.
And John Mechie was hurt too. Both
right.
of them.
This is interesting. Where's the comment? So Ralph brings up in the chat Corey Dennis. So he's the guy. Apparently, I didn't even know he had gotten fired by Ohio State.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just was looking at his resume. He's never called plays that I'm aware of. So that would be a major concern. How often do you see a guy go from a Power 5 job, albeit as a quarterback's coach, jumping to, like, you're going, yeah, that's the ladder you climb. But if the guy just got fired as a quarterback's coach, I think it would be kind of a questionable look if you're a Big Ten program bringing him in as your OC, a guy who's never called plays and just lost his job as a QB's coach. Like, that's probably a bit of a concern. Why did he get fired?
Well, I mean, a bit of a scapegoat, I think, to a certain extent, and there was a fear of that because who he's related to?
Yeah, Urban Meyer.
That's Urban Meyer. So, yeah, there was a feeling there that was, they didn't want to maybe step on that situation. I had thought that, he was probably a guy maybe similar to the situation we just talked about with Brian, that maybe he would have been better off kind of cutting his teeth at a lower level. I know I was listening to Zach Smith's podcast, and I thought he made a really good point on that maybe he should have probably had to kind of pay his dues at like a MAC level or something like that to kind of maybe work his way up the ladder, as a lot of other coaches have in the past.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's a guy that I would at least vet if I'm Iowa, because obviously he's been around great offenses. I'm sure it's fair to say by now he has coached a lot of, Haskins, Burrow, these guys.
Yeah.
He understands quarterback play in the passing game. Now, he may not be a great play caller, but his daddy-in-law is Urban Meyer. So, maybe that's someone you look at, because not because of the baggage that Urban's name brings, but because of the success and the offensive mind that Urban Meyer was.
Yeah, I think he got advanced a little too far up. I would be, as the most diehard Ohio State fan, to say he got advanced a little bit too far up the food chain a little bit too quickly, maybe because of that. And that's why I said that I think it would have been better off for him to maybe start off at a lower level, work his way up, and pay his dues like a lot of other coaches have to do. I'm not just to show like a consistency here.
Do we have any other names for the Iowa job? We have any other names that I can make content out of?
No, you
Any
need to
other
get
names?
on that. Plus the
No,
Caitlin
Corey,
Clark.
I heard from Erica it's been about 80-ish days since the search started. That feels like an extremely long time. Is there been any snags, or is it just
Well, like I said, they offered Paul Chris the job, and Chris sat on the job for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then basically we hit the deadline that Kirk had given him, and he couldn't commit to the job, so that offer was out the window. Kirk's had discussions with people like Andy Ludwig. Sounds like Ludwig, I don't know if that was mutual or if that was a Ludwig thing where he decided to stay at Utah, and those conversations fizzled out. I don't think sounds like Kirk is not interested in Joe Philbin. Ralph in the chat, Dana Holgerson is, he's like an Iowa guy, but like that Mike Leach type of system, right? Like that's kind of his background.
What about the name I threw out, Corey?
Huh?
What about the name I threw out, Joe Moorhead?
Yeah, that name's been brought up there. Is he still at Akron?
I thought so.
Yeah, I mean, is OC at Iowa better than head coach at Akron? I don't know.
Well, I mean, the Akron program.
Yeah, it's awful.
it should be. Akron's 132 out of 133.
Hey, he'd fit right in with Iowa's offensive rankings.
Oh my God!
Wow, that's checking on Joe Moorhead. I didn't know that he was. Yeah, he is still the head coach at Akron. Okay.
Geez, the guy goes from OC. He was head coach at Mississippi State, and then, the trajectory of that career,
Mm-hmm.
Where's Frank Reich? I keep bringing up his name. Nobody wants to talk about him. What's he doing now? Besides just sitting in the fetal position because he got fired. Anybody?
Frank Reich was a solid coach.
Drill?
I'm on the Google machine figuring this out. Because I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Frank Reich, and then who's the guy that just got fired by the Saints that was the OC down there for like 20 years?
The offensive coordinator?
Yeah, the offensive coordinator just got fired. He was the OC there for the length of Brees.
Pete Carmichael.
Carmichael. Yeah, Pete Carmichael.
Doesn't ring a bell.
And I brought up the name Drew Brees. Like if I was Iowa, I'd be calling Drew Brees. Remember Drew helped out with Purdue's bowl prep a year ago.
Yeah.
Like
you mean that game they lost 63-0?
Oh, shut up.
63-7.
Oh, those 7 points mattered, Mark. Those 7 points were the difference.
Hey, the Browns just let go of Alex Van Pelt, so I don't know if that's a name for you.
Is he related to Scott Van Pelt?
I don't believe that there is a relation, no.
No, he was the former Pitt quarterback.
Yeah.
And NFL quarterback with the Bills. I remember him with the Bills. Alex Van Pelt.
I'm wondering, what would it with Kirk's connections to? Well, first of all, the problem is these guys like Tom Brady and Drew Brees. Those guys have such ridiculous opportunities.
Yes.
It's like Tony Romo. Like they're making so much money doing other things that how could you possibly lure them into coaching with where collegiate athletics is with this NIL stuff and the portal and all? How could you lure them into that?
No.
Well, Brady's starting at Fox next year, if I'm not mistaken.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's no way you could lure them away from that stuff.
Yeah.
Corey, just to answer your previous question, Frank Reich is rumored for the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator job.
Okay, well, Kirk needs to be in Reich's left ear. All right, head first in the left ear.
Yeah, I thought Reich had that job in 2017 for that Super Bowl team. If
he
did,
they won that Super Bowl with Frank Reich. Yes,
the Foles team.
Yeah, I don't know that would be someone that if I'm Kirk, I don't know. I can't imagine unless he knows something I don't. Based on his resume, you'd have to call someone like that.
It would be
All right. I
hang
believe
higher.
we've come to an end of our conversation of Iowa
Trying to find an Iowa offensive coordinator
coordinator
for Corey.
coaching
Yeah.
candidates. Corey, you
Well-
got a lot to work with there. I think you need to get to work. I think you've got good 10 or 12 videos to.
Yeah, and I gotta pull up my YouTube studio and just watch the view numbers climb for the Brendan Diaz-Fernandez
That's right.
thing. So can I just say real quick, what's interesting about that is that you'll like this, Mark, that Brendan Diaz-Fernandez video on the channel. I think it got like when he entered the portal initially,
yeah,
it got like 17,000 views.
Good Lord. I don't even know who he is.
You know why it got 17,000 views? I think is it caught steam because part of the title was about Cooper DeJean, because Brendan was part of that DB room, and so the next question was, does Cooper DeJean return? So, but yeah, 17,000 views. I think it was 17,000. You might be able to tell me differently, but
that reminds me of, I can't remember the name of who was the wide receiver, David, at Ohio State, Mookie Cooper.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on the Missouri team.
He's in Missouri.
Yeah.
And
We played against him in the bowl game.
posted a video when he left Ohio State. He didn't even catch a pass.
Right.
And it just exploded. Yes.
Yeah, it was great. Well, I believe he was from Missouri. I think he was from that area, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's
real
where he played
quick
his high
before
school.
I leave, Darryl, you're really good with the old Google. Please tell Mark how many if we're talking about Brendan Diaz-Fernandez, how many views did the Shatea Wettering entering the transfer portal? How many views did that video get? This is going to help people are going to start logging on once the scuttlebutt starts spreading, Mark, that we're talking about former Iowa women's basketball players entering the portal. This is going to really help your view numbers. But I just want to get this out there before, because we were kind of ripping on women's basketball earlier. How many views did that video get, Drill?
What was the name of the player?
Shatea Wettering.
26,000.
Wow.
Nice.
Hey,
That's your most popular video, Corey.
It's the most popular of all time.
Yeah, that's your most popular video. Is that your most popular?
Is it really the highest of all time?
Yeah, if you go to your videos, you can hit latest, popular, and oldest. All I had to do is hit the popular one. It's your most popular video by 2,000 views.
Should I be proud or ashamed of that?
Got to be proud.
Okay.
You're a women's
Always take
basketball
pride.
channel, Corey.
I don't
Embrace
think I don't think anyone would guess my most popular video on this channel.
What is your most popular video?
It's about
Oh, I
Lincoln
know.
Riley.
It's the Lincoln Riley one, right?
Thank you. 70,000. And my
What
second
happened to
most
that?
popular was deleted by some moron who I won't name. It
Oh,
was.
those YouTube overlords, Mark.
It was
Hey, is
sabotaged and
is that
deleted.
is that moron still on the interwebs?
Jimbo Fisher 68,000? I believe so. I could look him up.
Hey, real quick before I go, did you see that player was at Miami that got like his 7th year of college or something like that?
Ninth,
Was it his 9th?
Cam McCormick. Yeah,
Wow.
9.
I think he's 26 now.
Well, he should transfer to Ann Arbor. He's going to fit in really well up there. Boom, boom. Just wanted to leave that for
Do you think he can wear his Waldo outfit?
It's ridiculous. Some of these guys taking the Van Wilder route here in college. It's,
That Lincoln Riley video, Mark, that you did that was so big, wasn't that the one where he's got his fingers up making the peace sign?
Yeah, as soon as I saw that on Google Images, I thought, there's my thumbnail right there. There it is.
Yep. I was gonna say, I think I'm not taking credit away from you, because that's part of your work, but that thumbnail, I think, was a part of the driving force.
I should just put that thumbnail on every video, whether it involves USC or Lincoln Riley. Just throw it up there. About every 5 videos, maybe I'll do that. Yeah. Or maybe
Mark,
I'll do that.
Yeah, if you can do that you should do that for your videos.
yeah, good stuff.
Well, I got to let you. I know you got several more MAC transfers to cover, so I'll let you go, and we'll talk more Iowa football tomorrow.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate
See you,
it.
Corey.
Thanks, Darrell, and thanks to Fake.
No problem, Corey. Mark,
Yeah.
you really should start a transfer portal video channel. I mean, 26,000 views for an irrelevant women's college basketball player. My goodness.
You sound like Corey now. He was just telling me that the other day, and he was
Well,
serious.
he came up with a good idea. I just parody good ideas when I hear them.
Well, I morphed his idea into this, a transfer
Oh.
portal live stream that only has 90 people watching. So it's far cry from 26,000.
Moose said he would buy 5 memberships if we get this video to 75 likes. So
Okay. What are we at now? Because
we're at 41, I believe.
this was intended to be a transfer portal update, meaning update usually has the connotation of it being quick, like, 20 minutes, something in that range. We're pushing 3 hours here.
Well, we might as well just go to the Ocho mark. I mean, that's only an hour away.
No, we're
So
not doing that. Not doing that.
Hey, Mark, so no Big Ten talk this week, by the way.
The Big Ten show is on Friday now.
Oh, we're moving it to Friday.
You missed the programming update. Yes,
My
Fridays
bad.
at 7.
Buckeye talk, by the way, Wednesday or Thursday, Mark?
It should be on Wednesday this week.
Okay.
Absolutely. And let's see what our like count is at. Oh, we're only at 56 likes. We're not hanging.
well, we
up.
can get there. If you usually, whenever I do that to Corey, he gets like 30 or 40 extra likes when I
Okay.
just say hit the like button. So I'm
Oh,
hoping
please hit
people
the
hear
like
me and hit the like button, because hitting the like button, I noticed they added like some cool animation where fireworks come out of it. So you can see fireworks if you hit the like button. If you're on a
46
mobile.
for 49, and now we're at 56.
See, we're moving on up, Mark. Hummus Hero asked me about my national championship odds for 2024, Mark. Would you be particularly interested in hearing 2024 early championship odds?
Yes, before we say goodbye, sure.
So I think Georgia has a 59% chance to win the national championship this year, okay?
Okay.
I mean, Georgia's just so good. I mean, they're just so loaded at every position.
Okay. We don't need analysis with this.
Okay.
Just read the
Ohio State 36, Texas 3, Alabama 2.
okay.
I just want to say I have no problem with Georgia being preseason number 1. I think Carson Beck is an outstanding quarterback and have a really good year next year. But Ohio State should at the very least be number 2. And getting a really good feeling, Mark. This is going to be one of the best Ohio State defenses ever this coming year. This could be when you look at the secondary D line, going to be top notch. Print those shirts, baby. 2024 national champions.
Okay, let's stop that. Okay, David, appreciate you being here.
All right, Mark.
The
See you,
real,
Darrell.
thank you.
No problem, Mark. Good talking to you, David. I think it's the first time we've met up, so it's good talking to you.
Good seeing you, man.
All right. And then we've got Anthony asked me to read his last comment, which is panel. So this was not a panel. So it's a one-man hosted show. Do you guys think Dabo Swinney would retire before he embraces the transfer portal? We have talked about that in the past. We will talk about that in the future. So I read your comment, Anthony. So you are welcome. And we will be back with John D'Adamo, the Ocho, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got the USC show, Trojan Conquest, live on the USC channel at 11 Eastern Time, right here at the Voice of College Football. Please hit the like button on the way out. We will see you soon.